Chapter 81 The Origin of Blood Marrow Worms Recommendation. Collection. I really can't find the ID that I gave yesterday, my stupid mobile phone assistant. In the world of One Piece, there should not be too many people who can know the conversation in Akatsuki through the wall. Ordinary people may not pay attention to these details, but in this naval headquarters, it is impossible for the Navy not to pay attention to this aspect. Every ward here is soundproofed. For example, strengthening the wall thickness, arranging sound-absorbing barriers, etc. So. Loya pushed Arudo's big face away helplessly, and said angrily, "Why are you asking so many questions? What's your business?" Loya. Arudo interrupted him with a serious expression, frowning and said, "Indeed, that belongs to the conversation between Tony and Hansa, but Hansa can't stand the excitement, we need to know what they are talking about." What he said was serious, but Arudo's eyes were full of anxiety and helplessness. Loya knew that Arudo wanted to ask what happened to Tony. He was afraid that he would lose his familiar companion. Tony's matter, as Huo Shaoshan said, was directly suppressed by Zephyr and did not spread. A guy like Arudo was even more serious and ordered by Zephyr. Fortunately, only Loya rushed to Luya town at that time, and the news did not spread from the bottom. Otherwise, no matter how Zephyr suppressed it, it would not be able to be suppressed. Because of this, the rest of the members were unaware of it except for the few people who carried out the mission. Facing Aldo's anxious eyes, Loya was stunned for a moment, then relieved. He grabbed Arudo by the collar roughly, pulled him to the same height as himself, and whispered in his ear, "No matter what the outcome is, what happens is their own choice. As friends, as comrades in arms, we just need to support them behind our backs and give our blessings silently. Do you understand?" Quote. If you don't understand, you'll be beaten up, right? So, Arudo quickly nodded his head, indicating that he understood. Whether he understands or not, Loya doesn't care, he just needs Aldo to express his opinion. No matter what happens, don't interfere. He did hear the dialogue inside without a word, but because of this, he felt that the matter was difficult, and he knew that this matter must not be publicized, and the fewer people who knew it, the better. At the same time, he finally knew the secret of Hansa. Why Zephyr is so secretive about this matter and why there are so few people in the know, these have answers. Because there are too many things involved, and the scope is too broad. The benefits are too great. He was shocked to hear it outside the door. After all, this involves the high-ranking world nobles, the Tianlong people. Who would have thought that this kind of blood marrow worm, which hungers for blood and death, and is full of tyrannical aura, was originally discovered for medical purposes. Because of its unique repairing properties, it is favored by Tianlong people, hoping to achieve the goal of immortality. This experiment is impossible to carry out in the open. Most of the Tianlong people are idiots, but the rest are shrewd. They deeply know that once this news is exposed, let alone a success, it will take less than a week, and even the samples will be cleaned up. At that time, I am afraid that the 5 old stars will quietly contribute to the flames behind their backs. So they handed things over to the secret chess piece of the Tianlong people, the killer code-named Shira, and ordered him to find a more authoritative organization in these areas to complete the research and solve the problem of the extremely low survival rate after the bloodworm parasite. And what Shira found was the BB family who saved Hansa. Immortality is a very interesting topic, and the BB family is deeply involved in it. But in constant research, the BB family discovered an even bigger use for the ancient bug, fighting. Through numerous tests, the BB family found that blood worms can not only actively repair the host's damage and remove diseased cells. In addition, it can greatly enhance the quality of the host in all aspects. They are natural predators. As long as the host has the ability to understand them, they can get started quickly, and even like Tony, the swordsmanship becomes stronger after being controlled. And once this kind of blood worm is parasitic, among the currently known abilities, only the fruit of the surgery and one of the 7 Cs, the fleshball fruit of Cocoon Bear, can be taken out. But this extraction is not without cost, because they are parasitic in the host's spinal cord and have replaced part of the host's spinal cord function. There is a way to take it out, but how to fill the gap left is a problem. Such a dazzling kuibao, the group of Tianlong people just thought of using it for longevity. It's just a riot. As a result, Hansa's family quietly re-established the bloodworm training plan, and successfully concealed the Tianlong people with the secret help of Shira. The hard work pays off, and in just a few years, they have been fused together and cultivated into a qualified killing tool. This batch of new bloodworms not only has the hardness and regeneration of the parasitic worms in Hansa, but also has the recovery and regeneration ability of bloodworms. Shira is the first parasite. The effect is remarkable. In just a few years, Shira jumped from a little-known swordsman to become the #1 killer in the killer world. But at this time, there was news that Shira died at the hands of Hawkeye Mahawk. After being stunned, the Bibi family expressed their disappointment that the bloodworms could not compete with the world's largest swordsman, but they soon discovered that it seemed that after Shira died, no one knew that they still had bloodworms in their hands. After the Bibi family completed their research, the first and only user was Shira. Because of this, Shira, who was originally under the orders of the Tianlong people to find a way to eliminate the extremely high mortality rate of bloodworm parasites, became the hound of the secret Bibi family. But it's too late to say anything at this moment. Shira is dead, and they haven't even found a second experimental body that can survive. In order to obtain more data, the Bide family threw more bloodworms into the sea, together with the swordsmanship cheats named Asura Kendo, which is actually a worm training manual, hoping to find a more perfect user to play the bloodworm. Do strength. It is Hansa who performs this task. And Tony is one of the test items. Because of the tyranny of the bloodworms, almost all the parasites were devoured the first time the bloodworms hatched. This is what Zepha said, the reason why the rest of the descendants could not be found, because basically all the people who picked up bloodworms died. At the same time, this is also the reason why 1 billion Bailey will be offered to Shira Kendo on the black market. If it wasn't for the fear of exposing their vain plans for longevity, the Tianlong people wouldn't mind raising the price to 10 billion Baileys, or even let the Navy take action. But it is conceivable that if the Navy knows that these cancers are trying to last forever, even if they will not join forces with the Revolutionary Army to overthrow their rule, it is absolutely absolute that the Navy will try to destroy them. The shrewd Tianlong people are naturally not so stupid. For the goal of immortality, the arrogant Tianlong people have learned to act cautiously, which is really ironic when you think about it. Chapter 82 People from the World Government Recommendation Collection. But, I have to say, it's really scary stuff. Leaning against the clean and white wall, Loya fell into contemplation. The moment the bloodworm hatches, it is indeed very dangerous. Strength, temperament, and slaughter are all indispensable. Without any of the same, the end is to be eaten up. As long as you are strong enough, and then send them a kill to their satisfaction, they will be completely loyal to you and become the most reliable sword and shield of your life. But once one day, you lose the desire to kill, then congratulations, you will feel the pain of 10,000 insects, and watch yourself be eaten clean bit by bit. Your friends and family can't even avenge you, because the bloodworm's body can only survive for more than 10 seconds after it leaves the host. Squeak. At this moment, the door of the ward was pushed open, and Tony bowed his head and walked out slowly. A group of people immediately gathered around, chatting and asking questions. There were also people running into the ward, trying to take care of Hansa. Tears welled up in their eyes when they saw Hansa's body. Hansa, dead. What? For a time, no one could care about Tony, and they crowded into the ward one after another. Aludo stared at Yuhi's eyes, and with a breath of Jinchuriki column in his nostrils, he grabbed Tony and said, "Bastard. Why did Hansa die?" Saying that, Aldo smashed Tony's face with a fist. Boom. The fist was so hard that Arudo, who shut in grief and indignation, never thought to keep his hand, and directly knocked Tony out of a coma. After the fight, Aludo's lips trembled, dropped Tony, and sat on the ground crying. For a time, the whole floor was enveloped in a sad atmosphere. Some people didn't cry, such as Loya, but the sadness in those eyes couldn't be erased. Cough, cough. Tony spat out a mouthful of blood and slowly got up from the ground. He glanced at Aldo, then at Loya, raised his handcuffed hands and handed them to Loya. Can you untie it for me, Loya? Aludo raised his head and stared at the two of them blankly. Loya didn't speak, he could hear it. Just now, at the corner not far away, a certain strong heart stopped for 2 seconds. Once, when Hansa stopped breathing. Another time, when Tony was talking. Okay, Tony Mill. Loya quickly guessed Zepha's thoughts, chuckled, and a key formed of ice appeared in his hand. Click. The chain was opened, and the handcuffs that fell down were kicked out by Tony. He moved his wrist and smiled at Loya. In the future, please give me more advice, Loya-kun. A month later, the training room of the Navy headquarters. In front of a huge iron block, a slightly thin figure gently pressed 2 fists against the iron block. Profound truth, biggest wheel, 6 kings absolute spear. The strength of Loya's whole body gathered together, and before launching an attack, the air began to vibrate, and ordinary people would be shocked and injured internally. His terrifying strange power, coupled with the destructive dragon-killing magic power, if it wasn't for the fact that he had already mastered the return of life, he would have really been unable to control it. These forces are condensed together, and the powerful impact is by no means comparable to that of Rob Luigi in the original book. Drink. Loya's eyes were round, and a powerful shock wave suddenly appeared on his fist. Boom. The shock wave instantly penetrated the iron block, and hit the wall behind without any reduction, tearing the thick iron sheet to reveal the innermost concrete block. The entire metal room vibrated at this moment, and the iron sheets on the walls made an unpleasant twisting sound. Outside the training room, a man standing under a tree smoking a cigar shook his hand and a little ash fell. Wearing a purple suit and sunglasses, with towering muscles and a strong waist, he is the former General Black Wrist Zepha. Hearing the movement in the training room, Zepha took down the cigar with deep eyes. 6 styles, return of life, the next step should be domineering, right? I really don't know where you can go in the future, Loya. Squeak. The vibration just now made the door bolt a little loose, and when the door was pushed open, there was a sour kiba sound. This broke the door. It's time to change it again. Loya grinned and walked out with a towel on. He saw Zepha under the tree at first glance. After all, in the midst of green, that touch of purple was so conspicuous. Yo, Teacher Zepha, do you have anything to do with me today? Loya has been in the training room for the past month. After Zepha handed him the basic cultivation method of returning his life, he stopped paying too much attention. He sees Loya's talent in his eyes, there is no need to tell him too much about some things, and what he understands is the most suitable for him. And according to Loya's cultivation speed, even if he takes a detour, he still has enough time to come back. But the experience and lessons learned in this process are greater than any teaching. So Zepha basically didn't find him much this month, not even the most basic test, so that Loya had enough free time to improve himself. Zepha didn't answer immediately. He took a cigar and looked up and down Loya. Yes, you can control your body perfectly now, which will be of great help to your future cultivation of domineering. With the movement of his mouth opening and closing, bits of unburned soot fell off the cigar and fell on the grass. In addition to feeling distressed about the environment, Loya is also worried that Zepha will cause a big fire. But before he spoke, Zepha had continued to speak. I came to see you today, of course there is something. Zepha said, your performance in Heathville last time, as well as Tony's matter, has been noticed by the world government. World government. Loya scratched his head, a little dazed. It is only normal for the world government to take notice of this. After all, Tony is not Hansa. In order to complete Hansa's will, Tony is also doing his best to practice this month. The tentacles that cannot be fully recovered from the body are very eye-catching. But then, what is the world government going to do? Why did Zephyr come to find himself? This was what he was most curious about, and he immediately asked, "So, what are they going to do?" "Arrest Tony. They dare." Before Luo Ya's words were finished, Zephyr interrupted him angrily. Although Loya wanted to complain, the other party really dared, but he was not interested in touching the bad head, so he turned around the topic. "Yes, they dare not. But what are they doing here?" Zephyr noticed his gaff and took a cigar. "What else can I do?" Tony said it was a bit ugly. It was just a test sample, and even if he sliced it, he wouldn't be able to get the blood marrow worm back. Speaking of this, Zephyr sneered. Even if they can take it back, they will not dare to do it. If this matter is put on the surface, no one can say what will happen. Even within the world government, all it is good to say that it is not good looking. Quote. While laughing at the arrogant Tianlong people, Zephyr turned to look at Loya. Although they are in the name of inspection work this time, their target is actually you. What's wrong with them? Mad dog. Luo Ya was startled, and his heart was cold. Don't look at the original book, where the pirates and the navy are basically fighting, and the famous masters are also in these two camps. But if this is the evidence, if you despise the world government, I'm afraid I really don't know why Huar is like this Yuhi. In fact, in the world government, let alone the mysterious 5 old stars and the army commander Cyborg Kong, the CP guys are not easy to deal with. It's really hard to say what Loya's life will be like to be targeted by such a behemoth, or even hostile. Chapter 83 Raw Bludge _ Fortunately, when Loya was worried, Zephyr explained the reason in the next second. It's not because you have been in too much limelight recently. Zephyr smacked her lips. Originally, Rob Lukey was finally born in CP9. With his talent, he learned 6 styles in a short period of time, and he went to sea to complete the math at the age of 13. This extremely dangerous mission made them known as a once-in-800-year wizard. As a result, a monster like you appeared. If you follow their custom, what are you, once in 1,000 years? That's why this face it hits with a bang. Hearing this sentence, Loya said, "What can I do? I can despair. Do you blame me for being so talented?" However, Rob Lukey's words. Loya rubbed his eyebrows and asked, "Then the person sent by the world government this time is Rob Lukey. What confidence does he have to challenge me?" Rob Ludge is indeed very strong and extremely talented. Although in the original book, Luffy, who was possessed by the protagonist's halo, was defeated by a rubber machine gun that had no effect before, but 2 years later, in 1522, he was already a member of CP0. CP0 is the superior of CP1 CP8. In terms of strength, it is stronger than the 8 of them combined, and it is directly under the world aristocratic Tianlong people. Whether it is position or status, it is far superior to other CP organizations. Being able to join it is enough to prove Rob Lukey's strength and talent. But it's just the level he showed when he fought with Luffy, or 4 years later. Roha doesn't think he is his opponent now, and he can hang the opponent up and fight. Then it's not clear. Zephyr breathed out a cigarette. Maybe, he has some cards. You defeated the great pirate Beard, this guy who is famous in the New World. If they were not prepared, they would not dare to let Rob Luigi beat you. In the name of this exchange, as long as Rob Luigi can defeat you. On the one hand, venting for the Tianlong people whose plans were destroyed, they please the Tianlong people. On the other hand, it suppressed the arrogance of you, a talented naval recruit, so that they can establish their own authority. The benefits are huge. Zephyr became more and more excited. At the end of his words, the sarcasm in his tone had become undisguised. Because there is only Loya around, Zephyr dares to express his heart so clearly. After all, the Navy is an institution under the world government after all, so blatantly arranging the noble Tianlong people, or as the former general of Zephyr, the entire Navy headquarters will be in trouble. After listening to Zephyr's explanation, Loya was also dumbfounded. This is true, when people sit at home, disaster comes from heaven. Then, I just admit defeat, Loya said tentatively. It's no good to win, and it's even more embarrassing to lose. It's better to just admit defeat. But as soon as this sentence was finished, Loya was immediately knocked into the soil by Zepha's fist. Bah, why do we have to admit defeat? Zepha's atmosphere was extremely high. You not only want to win, but also win the game with an overwhelming advantage. Let those grandchildren see the courage of Laozi's navy. Yes, that's it. You have to show your momentum. Roha raised his hands and shouted, "Don't worry, Mr. Zepha, no matter who the opponent is, I promise you that you will definitely beat him to death." Boom. Zepha staggered and hit his head against the tree. When he came back to his senses, he dragged Loya and spit, "Fuck you. Kill you, a big bastard. Do you think I don't have enough troubles?" Speaking of this, Zepha Shiame smiled. However, it's still okay to be health crippled. Let's learn from each other. What is it called to learn from without injury? Loya, as long as you're happy. Today, in the courtyard of the elite camp, a banquet is being held. In addition to celebrating the breakthrough of the Jerome brothers and swordsmen, this banquet also hosted Aldo's birthday banquet at the same time. Speaking of the Jerome brothers, it is quite a strange existence in this world of One Piece, which is full of whimsy. Except for the time before and after birth, the two people are almost exactly the same in the rest of their lives. As a baby, if Jerome's brother, who was sleeping upstairs at home, cried, even if the distance was far away, Jerome's brother, who was carried by his mother and went out to buy vegetables, would definitely cry at the same time. At first, the situation shocked the parents of the two and rushed to the hospital for examination, but no reason could be found. Over time, the two brothers became acquainted throughout the town, and everyone was saying that Brother Jerome had telepathy. In fact, it is. This point, countless gamblers who have lost to the two brothers can testify with tears. Obviously the two of them were sitting back to back, but they both knew the cards in each other's hands very clearly. It was originally a single-player game, but it turned into a two-unknown game, and the outcome was predictable. Later, the Jerome brothers joined the Navy. This talent has attracted the attention of Zepha. Under careful training, the strength of the two has grown by leaps and bounds, and they have passed the elite assessment in just 1 year. But now, at this moment when Hansa passed away and the elite camp was ridiculed again, the two of them practiced desperately, and finally both broke through to the realm of swordsmen. There was not a minute and a second difference in time, that is, at the same time, they broke through together under the watchful eyes of everyone. It just so happened that today was Erudo's birthday, and everyone decided to take out their private money and have a grand banquet together. At the banquet, Erudo was put on a funny paper hat, and Yuhi's yellow-pink fruit chan smeared his face. He grabbed Simon and rubbed it with Simon's big fist, until the whole cake was covered before letting go. "Humph, dare to throw me." Erudo hummed angrily, then immediately laughed like a onten fool, sticking out his tongue and licking his palm. Hee. So sweet. Simon, who was released, hurried away from him. He never thought that Erudo had made a small difference in shaving. Although it has not reached the point of controlling the use, the speed is more than a bit faster. I wanted to make fun of this stupid big guy and ran away, but I didn't expect that he was caught and stuffed for a good meal. This made Simon determined that his fruit ability should not be used for things like throwing cakes in the future. Brother Jerome was sitting at the dining table, eating the special giant fruit gummies one by one, and the happy taste on his face was about to flow out. At this time, a group of black suits entered the courtyard, aggressive. They unceremoniously burst the balloons on the ground and came to the crowd. "Christopher Loya, which one?" The leading black suit came to the middle of the banquet and looked at the elite battalion members whose movements were frozen in front of them. The person in the lead was wearing a high black hat, and a pigeon was standing on his shoulders. The funny thing was that the pigeon was also wearing a tie. As he spoke, he picked up a piece of cake on the table, opened and closed his chin and took a bite. "Eating something so sweet, no wonder you are such a waste. You bastard." Aludo stood up angrily and clenched his fists. Whether this banquet was held for him or not, he didn't really care if it was destroyed, but he would never allow anyone to insult his companions. Just as he was about to shoot, Simon ran over and grabbed him, signaling him not to act rashly. Arudo knew that Simon had a lot of knowledge and that there must be a reason for his advice. So he nodded reluctantly and stood still, but an inexplicable aura wrapped around his hands. That is armament hockey. As long as armament hockey is not hardened, the slight winding will not look different from the outside. The group consisted of men and women of all shapes and sizes. But he was uniformly wearing a black suit, which looked like the uniform of an organization, but it was definitely not the Navy. This is the Navy headquarters, the training ground for the elite battalion on the 3rd floor of the fortress. If a group of guys who are not the Navy can come here, then the identity of the other party can be easily guessed. Simon wiped the cream off his head, revealing his long blonde hair underneath. He took care of his image a little, then asked with a smile, "You are people from the world government." Chapter 84 Minghu was instantly killed, recommendation and collection. Wow! As soon as this statement came out, the members of the elite camp were all stunned. Even the people of the world government. What are they doing here? You must know that although the Navy is a subordinate institution of the world government, there is not much connection between the two. According to common sense, those who deal with the world government are the big men in the Navy, and they have nothing to do with them. They only need to perform tasks as a group of soldiers. So, what are these guys doing here? Still showing such obvious hostility. Not waiting for the other person to answer, perhaps not expecting the other person to answer. Simon, who knew the other party's style, continued on his own, looking at your age, as well as your demeanor and actions when you speak, you must not come to talk about official business. When you came to the Navy headquarters, you didn't talk about official business, but came to us. Looking for trouble, you must have some special mission. Quote. In the world government, generally only the members of the CP, the espionage agency directly under the world government, perform these tasks. Although it sounds like Simon is making unfounded speculations, Aldo and the others can clearly see the faces of many black suits on the opposite side. But this is not over yet. Simon's brain is running fast at this moment. Like Conan possessed, countless fragmented memories are quickly integrated together. Suddenly, with a faint smile on the corner of Simon's mouth, he pointed to the leader's black suit. I heard that CP9 had a genius more than 10 years ago, and they were called the strongest person in CP9's history for 800 years. That one likes to wear a high hat. So, you are Ra Blue Cairo. Ra Bluchi. The members of the elite camp gasped, and it turned out to be that guy. As a member of the espionage organization CP, Ra Bludge, logically speaking, of his personal information is not accessible to this group of recruits. But it can't stand the fact that this elite camp has Simon, a knowledgeable little monster. The Weston family has been loyal to the Navy for generations, leaving behind a rich heritage. Especially when it comes to all kinds of information and intelligence, it is not comparable to ordinary naval families. Once idle and bored, Simon told them the legend of Ra Bludge as if he were telling a story. This is a true genius who has mastered 6 styles in his teens, with countless brilliant records. At this moment, the members of the elite battalion were all murmuring, looking at the not-so-tall figure. Then, everyone became nervous and clenched the weapons in their hands. Because the other party is obviously looking for trouble. As Simon had speculated, the people who came were the espionage members of CP. In addition to CP9, there were also powerful members transferred from other names. The man at the head is Ra Bludge, who enjoys the reputation of the strongest in 800 years, from CP9. This time, in order to let out a bad breath, the Tianlong people also took great pains. The intelligence collection is not bad. Lucci glanced at Simon lightly, and then glanced at the rest of the elite battalion. But I'm not interested in doing anything to you rubbish. I'm here to find Christopher Loya. Yes, where is he? Are you there? Call. Before Lu Qi's words were finished, a harsh sound of breaking through the air was accompanied by scolding. A black shadow suddenly burst out from the crowd, and the wolf Kiba stick in his hand smashed at Rob Lu Qi unceremoniously. The other party's silent eyes and disdainful expressions prove without exception that they are not good people. They don't belong to the same structure. Since they did such a thing, swearing at each other, then the answer is obvious: these bastards are here to play. What is the most intolerable thing about a gang leader? That is, someone is more arrogant than him. So before Lu Qi's words fell, Mingda shot angrily. It is necessary to fight for this tone. The gangsters in the world of One Piece, if they didn't even have the courage to fight, would have died in the stinky ditch long ago. Facing the wolf Kiba stick wrapped in air, Lu Qi stood calmly on the spot, motionless, as if he was frightened. There's weirdness. Seeing this, Simon frowned and calmly clenched the things in his hands. Sure enough, at the moment Mingdi's stick reached his body, he was suddenly hit hard. 1 second, he kept charging forward aggressively, and the next second, he flew backwards quickly. The wolf Kiba stick in his hand was thrown high and rolled in the air. Swish! Simon shot decisively. A thin thread shot out of his hand, and quickly woven into a large net on the path that Ming flew back. After finishing the weaving of the thread at the front end, it was wrapped around the Jinchuriki column not far away. Simon pulled the other end of the thread, tugged it hard, and then shouted to Arudo. Aldo. Oh. Arudo's talent in combat need not be said much, just simply called his name, and he understood Simon's plan. Gotcha. The silk thread is just an ordinary silk thread. Ming just slowed down a little, then broke through the big net abruptly and continued to fly backwards. But immediately, a big hand caught him, and after reducing the momentum, it hugged him and held him in his arms. The powerful potential energy pushed Arudo, causing his feet to rub 2 deep ravines on the ground. But he caught Ming and avoided a more serious end. Minnie knew that her strength was insufficient now, so she ran to Aldo's side and took over the unconscious Ming. After some examinations, Minnie breathed a sigh of relief and nodded to Arudo and the others. Broken ribs and broken arms, but he's fine, he will be taken to the infirmary immediately. Hearing Minnie say this, a group of people breathed a sigh of relief. A few people carried Ming away, and then the rest took out their weapons and looked at Lu Qi coldly. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in front of Lu Qi. Do you want to die? Laugh. Tony's unconcealed killing intent rose into the sky, and before the long sword was unsheathed, a sharp sword chi resounded in the air. Naval Headquarters, in an extremely empty meeting room. Almost all the high-level officers of the Naval Headquarters were gathered in the hall. Only Kuzan, who went to the East China Sea for a mission, was not present. These big guys, every stomping, can make the whole sea tremble 3 times. Apart from Kazaru Borsellino and Akainu Sakaski, who are the same 3 generals as Aokiji, Lieutenant Admiral Suru, Chief of the General Staff of the Navy Headquarters, Tekken Garp, and Marshal Sengoku all came. On the opposite side of the group of bosses, there was a group of black suits dressed in the same way as Lu Qi and the others. Its identity is the world government official who traveled with Lu Qi and others. Why, isn't Zepha here yet? A bald officer was drinking coffee and pointed at the table with his index finger impatiently. We've been waiting for him for 5 minutes. As a Navy, don't you even have this sense of time? Hearing his words, the Navy bosses were calm and indifferent. The yellow ape is because of his lazy nature, and he hangs up high on nothing. Akainu is a qualified soldier. Among the people present, there are several people with higher identities than him. Before they speak, Akainu will not show his attitude. As for the others, Garp dozed off indifferently, woke up and continued eating senbei. Only Sengoku and Admiral Suru frowned slightly, but quickly relaxed. According to the position, even if the opponent is from the world government, the opponent is not an opponent on his side at all. If someone else dared to say that, Sengoku wouldn't mind letting them know the majesty of the Navy. But what is helpless is that their visit this time is a normal exchange on the surface, which belongs to the mutual inspection of the two violent agencies. But in fact, the Tianlong people standing behind them made them not dare to act rashly. Seeing the unexpected response, the bald official gave a disdainful cut, and continued drinking coffee. He also had nothing to do with the other party, and the two sides had to continue to work hard. Bang! The door to the living room was suddenly pushed open, and Zephyr in a purple suit walked in. He bit his cigar, and came to Karp's place and sat down carelessly. Hey. I heard there is a meeting. I'm not late. Although he was smiling, no matter who he was, he could see the undisguised ferocity in his eyes. Although the tiger is old, Yu Wei is even worse. Dare to do something to his own disciple. If the other party didn't dare to go too far and didn't do extra things, Zephyr wouldn't mind finding an opportunity to kill this group of maggots. Whoever said that between the Navy headquarters and Marijoya, there must be no pirates, right? Faced with Zephyr's cannibalistic gaze, the bald official had already swallowed his scolding and scolding. Sengoku looked at Zephyr with a headache and cleared his throat. Then, let's have a meeting now. Chapter 85 War. Clang. The moon kiba-shaped knife light flashed past, and Rob Ludge's figure immediately retreated, but even so, a little edge of the clothing was cut off. Looking at Tony, who was slowly retracting his knife, Lucci's indifferent eyes finally changed a little. It's interesting, but it's not enough. Enough or not, you'll know after you hit it. Your Excellency, be careful. Tony put the knife in the sheath, and assumed the posture of drawing the knife. The next moment, a cold light appeared. Yi Daolu moonlight slash. Ding. The sword light flashed, but Tony did not receive the expected feedback. Tony raised his head unhurriedly and looked at the long square nose in front of him, who was using two knives to hold his attack, a swordsman with two swords. No. Kaku forced Tony's sword to the side, kicked his feet out one after the other, and two vacuum slashes rushed towards Tony. Then, the two knives in his hands slashed vertically, and at the same time, they quickly slashed at Tony. There are 4 knives below. Jingle jingle. For a time, the two swordsmen fought together. It's just that it can be seen from the sword, light, sword and shadow that Tony was beaten and retreated. Relying on the parasite of blood worms, Tony's physical fitness has indeed been greatly enhanced, but this is only barely blocking the opponent's attack, and there is no more energy to attack Lucci. Damn, how dare you hurt Minged? Aldo couldn't hold back his anger anymore. He roared loudly, like a mad brown bear, and launched a charge towards Lucci. Then, let me play with you. A figure blocked his path. Kabbalah, who stood up, liked such a strong and slow opponent the most, and wanted to kick Aldo away with a smile. However, Arudo is not only large in size, but the collision he launches relies on the inertia generated by the weight advantage to control the enemy. His strange power, second only to Loya in the elite battalion, is his main attack method. Seeing Kabbalah standing in front of Taylili, the usual honest Aldo's eyes flashed at this moment, just like the fox who stole the chicken. Then, Arudo's elbow hit Kabbala's instep. Boom. The dull crash sounded, Kabbalah cried out in pain, and was knocked out instantly. He thought it would be very easy to block this stupid big man's collision with his thousands of Dao strength. However, after that moment of contact, he felt so stupid. I won't say it without exerting all my strength, and I didn't even use the iron block. You must know that Loya didn't dare to face Aldo's collision before he learned the 6 forms, let alone Kabbalah, whose strength was far inferior to his. In just one encounter, Kabbalah turned into a meteor, screaming and flying backwards. Scoff. At this time, with the sound of sharp blades cutting through the skin, the 2 CP members suddenly let out a whimper and fell down while clutching their stomachs. The 2 figures shuttled through the crowd, assisting each other, and the long swords in their hands attacked at a tricky and ruthless angle. With tacit cooperation, they quickly brought down a large area. They don't kill people, but the sharpness of the Liangkue Dao should not be underestimated. In addition, they have realized the profound meaning of slashing iron and officially entered the realm of swordsmen. No one can stop the slashing of the Jerome brothers. That's the general content. For specific things, let's communicate slowly in the future. The bald official picked up the cup, took a sip, and then spit it out. What, it's cold. Hey, help me to change a cup. This bastard. Sengoku had a cold old face and cursed in his heart, but he still motioned to the navy who was named to change a glass. Then, while sorting out the information, he pretended to be casual and said, "Then, about the exchange between CP members and the elite battalion, I think it will be tomorrow." "Oh, that's not necessary," the bald official said, turning his head to look at Zephyr with a strange look. "CP member, it's long overdue to find your disciples. Now, the battle is probably over." Quote. Huh. Sengoku was startled and looked at him seriously and unpleasantly. "Already gone? Why didn't you inform us?" "Well, it's just a battle and exchange. Of course, it's their own business. We old people don't want to get involved in the young people's business." Speaking of this, the bald official raised his mouth. "Anyway, they won't be too aggressive." Heavy. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Zephyr burst into laughter, making a group of people laugh inexplicably. The bald official looked at Zephyr with a gloomy face. "Do you have any opinion?" Former General Zephyr. Because of the incident a few years ago, for Zephyr, the title of former general is not an honor, and even the yellow ape who has the worst relationship with Zephyr will not use it easily. When the bald official said this, he undoubtedly touched Zephyr's bottom line. After laughing abruptly, Zephyr turned his head and looked coldly at the bald head in front of him. "That made him sick. I don't dare to have an opinion. But as you said, it's true that they won't be too hard. I just don't know. If your people are abolished, how much pension can the world government give?" Gollum. The bald official was startled, and suddenly had a bold idea in his heart. Then Jean shook his head and tried to clear the thought out. "No, it won't. Luigi has developed that trick, and it's not a problem to beat Christopher Roja." But why do I still feel a chill on my back? Hearing the screams in his ears, one of the most powerful teammates was entangled and the other was knocked away. Rob Lukey took a deep breath. His eyes became indifferent. What a bunch of trash. Boom. The flamboyant Aludo didn't react. His huge body flew out immediately. His throat was sweet, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. He didn't use the iron block, because he didn't even realize what was attacking him. Just for a split second, the blow from his stomach made his head bloody, and he was in a trance, not to mention using armament hockey for defense. Boom. Arudu, who smashed through the wall, slammed into the wall heavily, bounced on it, leaving a human-shaped dent, and then fell to the ground, his life and death unknown. For a time, the noisy courtyard suddenly became quiet, and everyone stopped their movements one after another, and all looked at Arudo, who fell to the ground dumbly. "Hey, just kidding." Simon's forehead burst into cold sweat, and a lot of sweat quickly wet his clothes. Even for that Rob Lucci, this kind of power is too exaggerated. Gulong. The members of the elite battalion swallowed their saliva and looked in disbelief at Rob Lucci, who was slowly closing his legs. His expression was flat and unwavering, as if it would be difficult to kick the third-ranked powerhouse in the elite battalion to half-death. "Just killed a fly at random. I rarely escaped from the mission, but I didn't come to play games with you." Kizaru picked up the information on the table, put his hands on his head, tilted his head and looked at the names on it. Loya-kun, what a terrible newcomer. Speaking of this, Kizaru said to Zephyr vulgarly, "Although the overall level of the recruits trained by the teacher is not as good as the previous one, this time, this little guy is really good." Humph. Pay attention to your image. Pulsolino. Zephyr snorted coldly. "You are an admiral." "Ah, it's so scary." Kizaru said indifferently. "The teacher has started to train people again." Sengoku sighed helplessly, feeling tired. Not for the hostility of Zephyr and Kizaru, but for the troubles to come in the future. One can imagine how angry Loha would be when he came out of the training room and saw that his companions were all injured and fell to the ground. And whether the angry Loya can clean up the CP guy, he has no doubts about this issue. Although he didn't know what the opponent's trump card was, he had a hunch that the world government's fate was settled. I will be busy with myself later. And looking at Zepha's attitude, it was obvious that he was sure of the news from Akatsuki, so he rushed to inform Loya, so he was late for this meeting. The main problem here is that Zepha didn't even think of notifying him first. That's what made him the most tired. Chapter 86 Loya appears. Inside the elite camp courtyard. Rob Lucci easily squeezed Minnie's kick and sneered, "Is that all you have?" Minnie was in a very bad state at the moment. Her left hand was dislocated, her ribs were fractured, and she felt severe pain all the time. Faced with the fact that her strongest blow was blocked, Minnie clenched the Kiba pass and twisted her waist desperately, trying to attack with her other foot. But, the other party is Rob Lucci. Iron block empty wood. This skill is unique to Lucci. After it is activated, it can return the opponent's strike force to the opponent without any leakage. In severe cases, it will even break a bone in an instant. Minnie kicked it up, and it only felt like she had hit an iron plate. But that feeling was different from the ice armor that hit Roha before. The strong rebound force instantly shattered her ankle. Ah! Minnie screamed, and beads of sweat ran down her forehead. Seeing this, Lucci grabbed Minnie's hand and threw Minnie out. With all her strength on her feet, Minnie, who had a broken foot bone, was no longer a threat. Lucci really wanted to kill them, because in his opinion, being weak is a sin. As a Navy, being weak is a serious crime. But just because the other party is the Navy, if they kill them now, even if the CP is a direct agency of the world government, it will get into a lot of trouble. At that time, facing the oppression of the Navy, he is very likely to be regarded as an abandoned child, which is not what he hopes to meet. Moreover, the superiors who accompanied him also had orders not to allow him to kill. He picked up his hat from the ground, patted the dust off and put it on. After doing these actions, he slowly scanned the field. There are still many people still standing, but the result is obvious, only a dozen people's CP won the victory. Most of the elite camp members fell to the ground with serious injuries and lost consciousness. Although the members of the team cannot all stand, they can at best sit and relax. After all, they are full members of the CP. There may be some deviations in their strength, but they are not comparable to this group of recruits who have not graduated and are not proficient in using the 6 styles, even the elite battalion. Kabbalah, who was initially attacked by Jerome and accidentally flew out, recovered, and the scene instantly turned into a one-sided battle. Brother Jerome realized the profound meaning of cutting iron, and his strength increased greatly. But this is only the growth of their swordsmanship. In terms of the most important flexibility, whether it is shaving or moonwalking, they are not as good as each other. Under the siege of the other party who has recovered, the two are quickly defeated. Tony barely supported a few hundred moves under Kaku's men. He was going to use the half-baked blood marrow worm to attack, but Kaku seized the opportunity and slashed his stomach with a sword, and was defeated. After all, the time for him to obtain the blood marrow worm was too short, and he did not join the elite camp for a long time. Even if he could only control one blood marrow worm in his body, he would not end up like this. And most of the fallen enemies on the field were exhausted from the battle with Aldo. This big man is simply not human. The powerful are scary, the physical is scary, the iron is scary, and even the scary can use armament hockey. This is something that Lucci has not done. In order to completely defeat Aldo, Rob Lucci had to do it himself, and only solve the battle after using the fruit ability for a short time. It's a pity that Aludo didn't cause much damage to the CP members. After all, he was too easy to be targeted, and being able to delay for so long was already his limit. This is the so-called elite navy. If you only have such strength, what will you use to bear the name of justice? Rob Ludge pulled a trace of disdain from the corner of his mouth and looked at them condescendingly. Just because of you rubbish. Naive. When the few people who were barely staying awake heard the words, their faces became extremely ugly, and their hearts were extremely aggrieved. But they couldn't refute Lu Qi. His skills were not as good as others, saying too much was just barking. If only Loya was here. Hey, Simon sighed, rubbing the bruises on his abdomen. At this moment, a cold and bone-piercing voice entered Lu Qi's ears. Excuse me, what have you done to my companion? Huh, Lu Qi was surprised that someone could come behind him when he was completely unaware. A decisive backhand punch, trying to knock back the opponent. But the result made him feel cold. His swift and violent attack was easily caught by the opponent. A big rough hand grabbed his fist, and then, twisted. Ah! Lu Qi couldn't help screaming. His arm was easily twisted behind him by the person who came. Then, the man kicked him forward and kicked him out. Loya. It's Loya here. Looking at the familiar figure in the field, the elite battalion members shouted excitedly. Is it finally here? Tony was lying on the ground. The bloodworm was repairing the sword mark on his chest and could not move now. He looked at Loya without blinking, with a relieved smile on his face. Then I can sleep in peace for a while. Just how strong Loya is, everyone in the elite camp doesn't know. But one thing is certain, as early as a month ago, Loya could kill any of them in seconds. That kind of unmatched power is the same as the feeling that Lu Qi gave them now. However, at that time, Loya had not yet learned the 6 forms. They don't know what level of Loya's current strength is, but it can be guaranteed that it is definitely stronger than Lu Qi. So they are relieved. The face of the elite battalion, the face of Teacher Zepha, and the face of the entire Navy headquarters can be guarded. Looking at the elite battalion members lying on the ground, Loya was smiling, but the evil spirit in his eyes was as cold as ice. He did not expect that the other party would not declare war. Zepha probably didn't expect that the opponent's movements would be so fast. After disembarking, there was almost no stop and went directly to the elite camp. Fortunately, the smashed training room needed repairs, and the iron pieces that were broken into the size of a thumb had to be cleaned up. Loya, who couldn't continue training, had to come out for food. Then he rushed to the elite camp, wanting to find some acquaintances to get together. After all, I haven't communicated with anyone for a month, and I'm not in prison. There are still inmates in prison. However, what he didn't expect was that he saw the scene of Minnie being thrown away as soon as he arrived. Whoa! Lu Qi pushed away the stone on his body and stood up. While moving his arms, he closely watched Loya's every move, guarding against his surprise. Christopher Loya. You finally appeared. What Loya needs is an overwhelming victory, and he was swept away by anger in the raid just now. Now he quickly calmed down and sneered, Are you looking for me? Yes. Lu Qi directly activated the fruit ability, and the whole person turned into a standing leopard, with strong muscles bulging high, and his body appeared strong and agile. I want to see, what kind of genius is a genius who learned 6 styles in a month? You have a lot of ideas. Really? Loya looked at Lu Qi calmly, this genius with his own unique, dark view of justice. But I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed, because the gap between me and you is too big. It's too big for you to understand. Oh, is that so? Then show me your prowess. Christopher Loya. Lu Qi suddenly roared and rushed towards Loya. That's what it means. Someone said I wanted a eunuch. How can it be? I am a man with 5,030 days without manuscripts. Regarding the updates of the past 2 days, as well as the name of the book friend group skill, Dashu has no time to do it, so he gave up if he wanted to be an eunuch. Am I not on a business trip this weekend? Originally prepared well, come back and put everything out. However, on the train on the way back, I suddenly remembered that 618 was Father's Day. Unable to bear this, he decided to borrow a friend's car and drove back to his hometown for 2 hours. Therefore, the group name and new skills were not released. Do I still bring the desktop computer when I go back to my hometown? In addition, due to the more and more problems mentioned by book friends, there is also the matter of rewarding and adding more. To be honest, I really don't have time. I believe many book friends know about the daily life of a working dog. Sometimes it is not up to you to decide whether to go to work or go to get off work. Even after get off work, if a colleague asks to go out for a drink, it is impossible not to go. In fact, more than 10 chapters of the 86 chapters that have been updated were completed with the big tree drunk. Keeping to updates is not my limit, but it is the limit that does not affect my peaceful daily life. However, as long as there is time, the big tree will definitely add more updates. As for the reward and update rules, there are no rules for now. At first, I thought about it and learned from the big guys in the author group. However, the concubine couldn't do it. So, I'll just follow my rhythm. Just like me at the 5th watch and the 3rd watch, when there is time, or I think the commemoration is of great significance, I don't need to be urged by book friends, I will take the initiative to add more updates. Of course, there is a reward to recommend the collection as the most roar. To tell the truth, no results, talk about the power of the fart. Finally, today's update was put in the evening. I was on my way to the company and didn't even go home. MMD, I wouldn't be so diligent if I hadn't been poor. It's all because the day when the salary is paid is too rough. Half a month's wages are gone, and now smoking is all in Jonanhai. 7 yuan a pack. Why? Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. Modified at 12:55. What the hell? It turned out to be the helmsman. Thank you book friend Dark Maple for the reward. I won't say much more tonight, thank you Big Tree. I just wondered, why do I suddenly have a monthly pass? I didn't say it was on the shelves, but it was only after the big guys in the two-dimensional author group explained it to me that I understood. Chapter 86 Ruthless Lawyer. Regarding the rewards of the book friends yesterday, because I forgot today's Monday, the weekly list was invisible. Then the assistant doesn't pop up again, please be patient if you can't type it out. Shave. Lucci knew that Roja was very strong, not only his record and the powerlessness that he just gave him. Even more now, the invisible aura generated by the other party's anger. Even though Loya seemed to be standing there unprepared, that inexplicable sense of oppression shrouded him all the time. If the flying squirrel and others are present, they will know that this sense of oppression comes from the dragon power attached to Loya's transformation. Learning to return life allows Loya's perfect master to hold every power of his body, which enables him to use the dragon's might, which is released after deformation, in normal conditions. Although it is still impossible to achieve the level that can affect the actions of the big pirates when fighting against Beard, there is no doubt how terrifying this power will become with continuous development. After using shaving, Lucci suddenly turned into a black line invisible to ordinary people, and instantly appeared behind Loya, stretched out a finger, and the deformed sharp nails stabbed the back of Loya's head fiercely. Finger gun. There is no doubt about Lucci's accomplishments in the six-style cultivation. The power of this attack will not be weaker than the Halu stone bullets shot by Rocky before, and the penetrating power is even stronger. Loya felt the strong wind behind him, and was about to thicken the ice armor on his body, but suddenly stopped the supply of magic power and smiled slightly. I said, the gap between you and me is very different. You don't believe it. Want to compare the speed? Then I will accompany you. When Lucci was about to stab Loya, Loya also turned into a black line and disappeared. What a great speed. Lucci frowned slightly. At this moment Loya showed a speed beyond his imagination. But it was too late to think about it, when Lucci suddenly felt a strong murderous intention, and his body rushed forward without hesitation. This action without the slightest image saved his life. Almost at the moment he left the place, an ice spear exuding a chilling air passed through the position where he was standing, and it was dangerously close to the place. His face pierced into the ground, leaving a bottomless pothole. A few strands of yellow hair on Lucci's face were brushed by the ice spear, and they were directly broken by the frost. Lucci was shocked. What a terrifying freezing effect. Cut. Dodged. Loya's lazy and unfeeling voice sounded behind Lucci. Then, it's better to have a wider range. Ice make ice field. The turbulent cold spread rapidly in all directions, and everything was frozen everywhere along the way, and soon came behind Lucci. "Do you think this kind of attack can hit me?" Lucci snorted coldly. The opponent's movement speed is indeed fast, but the speed of attacking now is just too slow. He calmly chose the moment and jumped up to avoid the freezing of the ice sheet. But almost at the same time, Loya raised his arm and pointed the palm of his right hand at Lucci in the air, and also sneered, "Yes, but are you faster in the air than on the ground?" Rob Lucci. Ice Fall's funeral. Click click. Countless ice cubes woke up at this moment. They bypassed the elite battalion members spread out on the ground, like ghost hands from hell, stretched upwards, trying to drag Lucci down. What the hell is this? Like everyone who saw this trick for the first time, Lucci thought the ice cubes on the ground were ordinary ice cubes, but he did not expect that he could be controlled a second time. But Lucci is not Rocky. The empty courtyard is not a narrow hall, there is no terrain advantage, and he will use the moon step at the same time. Rocky only freezes 1 foot, and then there is no more. Lucci used it several times and quickly escaped from the ice pursuit. In midair, he used an iron block to resist the attack of the cold air, and on the other hand, he suddenly brought his feet together, and with a crisp click, the ice on his feet was shattered. Then immediately launched the moon step and came to a higher altitude. "Now, can you still catch me?" Lucci said flatly, as if it wasn't his feet that were frozen unconscious. "Who said I was going to arrest you?" Loya smiled and clenched his palms suddenly. Click. What? Only then did Lucci realize that the ice sheet that had spread out had frozen most of the CP members in place. At this moment, it has been wrapped together by ice cubes, forming a huge ice ball. "What do you want to do?" "What?" Loya tilted his head and smiled. "Guess what?" "Ah!" The ice hockey clenched instantly, and the screams of CP members instantly came from the completely isolated hockey puck. "My target, from the very beginning, is other people." Luoya clenched his fist tightly. A crazy look appeared on his face. "Don't you think that if you beat Lao Su's comrade, Lao Su will I trouble you?" Raw bludge. Although crazy, at this moment, Luoya's eyes were extremely cold, and the screams from behind did not make him feel any sympathy at all. "As you said, being weak is a sin. Since you think so, then I will help you clean up this group of waste, so that they don't get in the way and cause you trouble." "You bastard." Lucci looked at Loya coldly, and he finally knew where that sense of oppression came from. That is the momentum of predators. From the very beginning, Loya took him, all CP members, as prey. At this moment, Lucci finally changed his face, and he found that he was beginning to be afraid. Even at the age of 13, he was not afraid of being targeted by 5 cannons. And now facing Loya, the only thing in his life that he felt was fear. Click. Loya released his hand, and the ice puck behind him exploded, shattering into large and small ice cubes, and fell to the ground together with the CP members. CP are still alive, but all of them are dead. Whether it is a comminuted fracture of the whole body, or severe frostbite of the muscle and skin tissue, these are not easily cured. With that spare time and money, Loya believes that the world government will retrain a group of CP members. Looking at the tragic state of his companions, Kaku, who was fortunate enough to escape the attack, swallowed and squatted on the ground tremblingly. "Will be killed, really will be killed." Even though his feet have been frozen by the edge of the ice sheet and lost consciousness, at this moment Kaku can't care so much anymore. Loya's ruthless means frightened him, and now he just begs Loya to stop focusing on this. After listening to Loya's words, Lucci took a deep breath. "Then, let's fight." His own members suffered such heavy losses that even if he was the leader of CP9, he would be severely punished when he returned. Now, he can only fight to the death. As long as he defeats Loya, all this will become glory. But from the current situation, the chance of defeating Loya is very low. When the voice fell, Lucci suddenly turned into an afterimage, and at a speed faster than just now, he rushed towards Loya again. Then, the index fingers of both hands stretched out, and the storm-like attack was launched in an instant. Finger Gun Madara. This is a move that Lucci can only activate when he enters the state of returning his life, and its power is not bad. Numerous finger pistol attacks capable of piercing through steel rushed towards Loya, surprising the members of the elite battalion. Loya, can you stop it? Have you finished playing Speed 6? Finger Gun 8 Childish Girl. In the face of Lucci's attack, Roha did not dodge, but chose to meet him head-on. He said that the gap between him and Lucci was already too big for Lucci to understand. Since he refuses to give up, then use the same thing to defeat him in his proudest place and completely smash his self-esteem. Brush. The dense sound of breaking the air sounded, the curved claw shadows in the sky collided with the straight shadows, and the air burst into lamentations. Obviously it is just a fight between two humans, but it gives people the illusion of facing a natural disaster. The explosion in the air was as deafening as a bomb exploded. In just a few breaths, the two fought hundreds of times. Loya couldn't help but admire Lucci. He was indeed the strongest in 800 years. There is a huge gap between him and his own physical quality, but he can persist for so long with his higher level 6 style attainments, which makes Loya moved. However, what has been decided must be shaken, and he must defeat Lucci. Kacha. Madara's fingers suddenly made a crisp sound, which was inconspicuous in this fierce confrontation, but was clearly captured by the two of them. Break. Loya's eyes narrowed. Then I'm sorry. Laugh. The shadow of the claw flashed, and Lucci's two fingers were broken at the same root, and the incision was as smooth as a mirror. Chapter 87 Akainu, Sakaski. Damn. Suffering heavy damage, Lucci's figure instantly retreated, clutching his bleeding hands, panting in embarrassment. He suddenly regretted taking on this task. As a CP9 Secret Service officer, he should continue to lurk in the Seven Waters City to inquire about the whereabouts of Pluto, instead of fighting for the world government and the Navy here. Even said, still can't beat it. As Zephyr said, the Tianlong people were involved in this matter, and the world government did not dare to act rashly. On weekdays, it's okay to say that they are fishy, common people and extravagant. Anyway, your thin body can live for decades. No matter how arrogant and domineering it is now, it will be Lois a few decades later. However, you are trying to live forever. This has hit the bottom line. The bottom line of everyone, including the bottom line of some high-level officials of the world government. Even in the face of the secret pressure of the Tianlong people, the world government only arranged for members of the CP to come and beat the Navy to express their attitude, but they would not go too far. Otherwise, Luoya wouldn't believe it. The spy agency directly under the dignified world government can't even call out a subordinate with the strength of a general. Is there no one in the legendary CP0? Rob Ludge is a qualified agent. What if the Navy is a genius, and what if you compare me to him? He doesn't care about that. It's just that the order taken from above is a last resort. And now, having two fingers cut off by Loya's claw, he suddenly regretted taking this mission. Look at the people on the field, Kabbalah and Kaku, these two powerful teammates with a Taoist value of nearly 2,000. One is uncertain, and the other is panicked like a lost dog. The rest of CP's elite team members were crushed to pieces by Loya's ice waterfall. This time, the world government has lost a lot of money. More importantly, the two were obviously unable to continue the lurking mission. The upper level also needs to consider whether the iceberg will doubt whether the latent mission will fail. There are shadows of Tianlong people behind these two tasks. No matter which one fails, Lucci's fate can be imagined. But now, it seems that failure has become a foregone conclusion. Life is back. Rob Lucci took a deep breath, and the muscles at the joints that were bleeding began to contract, squeezing each other, and soon the bleeding stopped. Because Loya simply used the 6 forms, otherwise it would not be his turn to stop the bleeding. Ice Dragon's freezing ability would freeze even the tissue fluid in his cells, not to mention the blood in his blood vessels. As this, the strongest recruit of this class. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the field, standing between the two, the domineering cloak of justice and the suit that stabbed Yuhi like blood on the back prove the identity of the person who came. It is one of the 3 admirals of the Navy, Akainu Sakaski. Oh yes, and the baseball cap on the head. Red Dog. Luo Ya's pupils shrank, and he took a deep breath. When did this guy come back? The 3 generals of the Navy usually have more work than the General Lieutenant General. Especially in the past few years when the original work is about to start. Although the sea looks peaceful, there are surging undercurrents, deep water and waves, and the slightest carelessness will result in broken bones. This kind of danger and uncertainty has led to the fact that most of the lieutenant generals in the headquarters are relaxed and comfortable, while the generals with higher status are often running around. A few months ago, Aokiji was on vacation, and Akainu took over the follow-up tasks. Unexpectedly, Loya has not waited for Kuzan to come back, but Sakaski has waited. However, he is not weak now, and he is also in the Navy, so there is no reason to be afraid of him. Seeing Akainu standing between the two, motionless, Loya frowned and stepped forward. General Akainu, are you trying to protect him? The situation on the field is obvious now. If he continues to fight, Lucci will definitely be abolished by Loya and follow in the footsteps of Kabbalah and others. Now that Akainu is here, although he didn't say anything, his position showed his attitude. Obviously, he's here to stop the fight. Hearing Loya's words, Akainu glanced at Loya lightly. The dragon's body sounded an unprecedented alarm, causing the hairs on Loya's body to stand upside down. With this light glance, Roha was horrified. The blue magic pattern involuntarily climbed up his face, and cold sweat dripped on his forehead. This was the first time he faced the undisguised aura of a naval admiral. Just a glance made him feel that he would be killed in the next second. Fortunately, this momentum came and went quickly, and it was released in an instant and then retracted. Akainu didn't come here to bully the younger generation. He was grumpy and troubled by his subordinates' questioning. Loya's questioning question just now made him very uncomfortable, so he took the shot unpleasantly. Looking at Loya's nervous appearance, Akainu snorted coldly. I'll stop, this is the order of Marshal Sengoku. Akainu said plainly, and then set his eyes on Lucci on the other side. If you keep fighting, this old man won't protect you. Of course, you can choose to die here. Although he is displeased with Loya's rudeness, he is a Navy, and in comparison, Rob Luigi of CP9 has a higher hatred value. At this moment, Lucci didn't know what happened just now. The general's aura radiated freely. As long as Akainu didn't want to, even if he and Loya were back to back, he wouldn't feel any discomfort. But when Loya's magic pattern roamed, the soaring momentum made him bitter. He was trying to kill himself, and he hadn't used a single trick yet, and the other party didn't even come up with all his strength. Sure enough, it's an overwhelming difference. He reluctantly twitched the corners of his mouth, saluted and replied, yes, Akainu-sama. As a member of CP9, his identity does not need to salute Akainu, but if it hadn't appeared, he would have been beaten to death. This, adult, is also a statement. This time, they completely conceded defeat. Akainu was satisfied with Lucci's words, nodded, and then motioned for him to take away the CP members on the ground. Although he had Sengoku's orders, he couldn't get Akainu to agree with his actions. Although the justice he believes in is extreme, in order to implement justice, he does not care about the casualties of innocent people. But it is undeniable that Akainu is still doing justice. Just like the green pheasant. He is the most angry about the Tianlong people's intention to live forever. But he was also the most qualified soldier. Just like Lucci, as long as the world government needs it, he doesn't mind helping the Tianlong people to complete the experiment. This is an attitude determined by his identity. But if he did that, the justice in his heart would also tell him that it was wrong to do so. It would be merciful not to attack these guys who came to beat the Navy. As for the statement, do you really think Akainu dare not kill Lucci? In Loya's eyes, Akainu is actually somewhat similar to Danzo. They are all unscrupulous guys for the purpose, and they also have the ambition to control the power. It is a pity that Sengoku is not a stable Sarutobi, it is more violent and more majestic. If he is weak and dares to play clever tricks behind Sengoku's back and violate yin and yang, the end will be miserable. Akainu still has a long way to go before he wants to be promoted. Watching Lucci take away the CP members, Akainu suddenly looked at Loya, an unprecedented smile appeared on an old face. He looked up and down Loya, nodded and praised, "You did a good job. Although you abolished the people of the world government, you will definitely make the latter very dissatisfied with us. But as a soldier, I have to say, you did a great job. Whoever dares to provoke the majesty of the Navy will be severely punished." Loya remembered what the angry Akainu said in the original book, because Fujitora knelt down to King Kuzan, and he was relieved. It seems that the most dangerous boss in the Navy is quite satisfied with himself. If you say that, don't you need to be scolded? Loya thought happily. Zephyr just asked him to defeat Rob Lucci and give him an unforgettable lesson, and definitely didn't ask him to abolish this group of people. Just as the other party is afraid of killing someone because of their own identity, why don't they care about each other? Even in terms of results, Loya's approach was even more extreme. The worst thing on their side was Minnie's fracture, and on the other side. Tisk tisk. Akainu is now making a statement, otherwise Marshal Sengoku will be scolded by the commander of the entire army, Mr. Zephyr will be scolded by Marshal Sengoku, and he will be scolded by Zephyr again, accumulating 4 layers of hatred, none of them have any weight. How can people help? Chapter 88 Hospital Escape Plan, the third update. Ask for collection and recommendation. Looks like we're overthinking it. Sengoku rubbed his eyebrows and quietly looked at the bald face that was blackened into a pot. What Zephyr said in the conference hall before was not a mere statement, but a fact. Look at this group of paralyzed guys in front of you. If you don't tell him, this is a member of CP, an intelligence agency directly under the dignified world government. Sengoku thought it was a country fighting a war. Yes. Not so. Looking at Rob Ludge's attitude, you can tell that these guys are really members of CP. Teacher Zephyr really brought back a monster. Kizaru looked at the wounded who were carried out with a surprised look on his face. He was still so wretched on the surface, but his tone revealed the shock in his heart. Like a gangster, he leaned on the threshold and tilted his head to look inside the courtyard. Looking at the icy hell, Madara's blood was mixed with the ice water, and Kizaru couldn't help but think of the former Aokiji, is the talent of the general. It's really scary and scary. The people coming from the world government are not only bald officials, but also several officers of the CP. In addition to Kabbalah and Kaku who are members of CP9, the people Lucci brought to smash the scene this time, the rest are the agents in the rest of the CP. Watching their subordinates being carried out like dead dogs, with their limbs twisted into strange arcs and their frozen skin, made the faces of these officials very ugly. Now, in addition to resenting that Loya was too heavy, they also resented the baldness suggested by the proposer. If it wasn't for him saying that the strength of the official CP members is enough to crush the elite battalion, they would not let Lucci come to trouble. The most important thing is that CP09 are just an espionage organization after all. Except for the necessary masters at the bottom of the box, the overall strength is far inferior to the Navy. For a long time, the CP and the Navy have been at odds with each other, beware of each other and suppress each other. The former relies on a higher comprehensive strength, while the latter relies on the glossy shell directly belonging to the world government. The only basis for this plan is Rob Lucci, the strongest in CP 9,800 years. As a result, the strongest man was abolished. The 2 index fingers were cut off, and the wound was healed by Lucci's own life. A human fist is a whole, no matter which hand. If a finger is lost, the power it exerts again will be weaker than before. In the days to come, with his extremely high attainments in the 6 forms, Lucci may still be able to enjoy the title of the strongest in the past 800 years, but his future road is basically blocked. These scheming officials can see that at this moment Lucci has been broken by Loya, and he may not be able to walk out of the shadows for a lifetime. It can be imagined from this that even if they have the protection of identity, their life will not be much easier in the future. In this sea, the Navy has more say than CP. If you don't want to be stumbled secretly when you perform tasks in the future, you have to shrink your head and be a human being. I thought that I was ordered to come here this time, and I could show my face in front of the Navy. As a result, Loya told them with strength, what is a face slap? CP and world government officials did not stay for dinner and left Marineford that afternoon. What else can I keep, being pointed and gossiped behind my back? Don't they dare to arrest people in the Navy headquarters? Having lost face, they had no choice but to leave in despair. As for the CPs who stayed in Marineford for treatment, I won't take them away. You still have to pay for the medical expenses. You will be disgusted. Regarding this point, Zephyr directly paid for the medical expenses out of his own pocket. In his words, it was my disciple who beat people, and I, the teacher, are obliged to bear the medical expenses. He was happy anyway, so Sengoku could only let him fool around. Besides, he didn't want to continue wrangling with them for these little money. Not worth the loss. Managing the Navy headquarters is enough to tire him out, and if he continues to negotiate with them, his thick white hair will become as sparse as Garp sooner or later. At night, the Navy headquarters hospital. The two figures sneaked along the wall, avoiding the patrolling soldiers, and quietly appeared in the grass at the corner of the wall. They are about the same size, but it can be seen from the action that the person in front is the leader, taking out the rope while gesturing and handing it to the latter. The screen turns. Loya took the rope and looked up at the towering white building. Hey, Simon, are you sure they're all on the 7th floor now? Don't make an oolong then. After Simon took the rope, he continued to rummage in Kabuto with his head down, and when he heard Loya's words, he stopped. Don't worry. I grew up in Marineford, and I know how many corners there are. Now the whole in this medical building, only the 7th floor is under martial law. Where do you think they are? Simon patted his chest to assure Loya, and suddenly his eyes lit up, and he took out a hook from his bag. Found it. This is it. He pulled the rope on Loya's hand, wrapped the hook to secure it, and clapped his hands. It's done, aim at Noah. We only have one chance. Oh, don't worry. Loya nodded solemnly. His far superior vision allowed him to clearly capture a balcony on the 7th floor in the dim night. A piece of yuhi-colored satin was tied to the guardrail and wafted in the night wind. Loya stretched the rope and swung it in a circle by his side, and as it swayed, there was a whining sound in the air. By the way, Simon, do all myopia have night blindness? At this time, Loya asked curiously, raised his chin and pointed to Simon's eyes. Can you hurry up? Oh. Seeing that Simon, who was poked at the pain point, had a bad tone, Loya had to start work honestly. The hook claws turned faster and faster, and suddenly, Loya threw it up sharply. Whoosh. Click. The hook drew a straight diagonal line in the dark night, and hooked the balcony where the yuhi-colored satin was located. Loya exerted his strength lightly, pulled it back carefully, and then nodded to Simon. Very good. Let's start the next step. After Simon got the signal, he took out the phone bug from his arms and dialed it. Room 702 of the hospital was extremely crowded at the moment. Of course, the main contributor was the big man Aldo, who appeared in the room like a door while squatting. At this moment, in the dark ward, a pair of green eyes flickered in the darkness. Brother Jerome leaned to the left and right of the door, watching the movement in the corridor through the glass windows. Ma Minnie, the blonde ocean, is sitting in a wheelchair with a phone bug in her hand. She was waiting for Simon's call. At this moment, Brother Jerome at the door suddenly shouted nervously, "Oops. The head nurse has started to check the ward." Buzz. The elite battalion members rioted and panicked. Why did the head nurse start patrolling around 10 o'clock? Didn't it say 12 o'clock? Looking at the panicked companions in front of him, Aludo bit Kiba. I'm going to distract the head nurse's attention, you hide. No. Anyone can go, but you are not allowed to go. The members quarreled one after another. This was an escape plan to make up for Arudo's birthday party. If he, the client, couldn't leave, what was the point of them leaving? Shish, be quiet. Brother Jerome reminded. Listening to everyone's words, Aldo was very moved and had to sit down again quietly. For a time, the whole ward could only hear the sound of breathing one after another. Just then, there was a soft click from the balcony. Everyone was refreshed and looked back subconsciously. Hum. The phone bug in Minnie's hand began to vibrate, and it was very clear in this open environment. She hurriedly picked up the phone bug. Hello. Simon. It's me, I'm ready. Let everyone slide down the rope. Don't worry, there is a strong man named Loya below, and it won't fall. Chapter 89 Aludo's Birthday Party, 4th more. Please recommend and collect. Simon's voice was like the sound of heaven, and when they heard his words, everyone stood up with joy. Bang dong dong. The sound of desks and chairs colliding was so clear in the hospital late at night, the middle-aged head nurse closed the door of the ward beside him, turned around abruptly, and shouted to this side, Who's there? 702 is a relatively large multi-person ward. It exists as an emergency ward in wartime. The wounded who need to rest on weekdays will not be arranged there. Could it be a thief? The head nurse muttered to himself, and suddenly the fat on his face began to tremble. Where is the little thief? How dare you steal from the Navy headquarters? As she said that, she rolled up her sleeves viciously and rushed towards this side with her fist raised. Come out by yourself, my mother won't kill you. The sound of Dong Dong Dong's footsteps was so heavy that the Jerome brothers noticed the abnormality immediately. Leave now, the head nurse is mad. Whoa. This time Aludo is not calm. That vicious old woman, if she finds out about her and others' escape plan, she will definitely give her milk the next injection, and she will choose the most bitter medicine. Aludo turned pale when he heard the head nurse, grabbed Minnie and a few other inconvenient companions, and trotted towards the balcony. Minnie, who was carried by Aldo on her shoulders, did not forget to remind the phone bug downstairs, Hey. Loya, we are coming down. Hurry up. The phone worm rang and Loya replied calmly, Oh. Come on. Trust me. I'd rather believe in the quality of the rope. Minnie groaned in her heart for a rare moment, and then felt her body vacate for a while, and Aludo had already jumped over the balcony. Then the body shook, and the other party grabbed the rope and slid down rapidly. The bandage on Arudo's hand due to the injury has now become the best protection measure. Squeak. The rough-skinned and thick-skinned Aldo used his domineering and iron blocks together. After the bandages were worn away, he rushed to Loya with friction. Hum. The blue magic pattern began to wander, forming mysterious tattoos on Loya's face and shoulders. He grabbed the rope with one hand and stretched out the other hand, blocking the path that Arudo slammed into. Boom. Aludo almost didn't spit out his dinner. He felt as if he had hit an iron Jinchuriki column, and his stomach turned upside down. The speed brought by inertia made him feel like his internal organs were torn. Aludo was about to say something, but Loya grabbed the belt and threw it away. Take them with you at once. Remember, meet in the canteen of the boot camp. Okay. Now is really not the time to care about this. Arudo heard the words and ran out 3 meters in one step. Waiting for him to run deep into the woods, Simon and Roja looked at each other, smiled and gave each other high fives. Snapped. Ha ha ha, this fool. Yeah, ha ha ha, ouch my belly. Did you see his expression just now? The two rolled around laughing, and only stood up after a while. Simon wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and patted Loya's shoulder. Let them all go, Loya-san, we have to hurry up and prepare. Loya nodded, pressed both hands on the ground, and the endless chill instantly condensed in the air. Ice make ice slide. Kacha kacha. The cold wind at night was already very cold, and now it became even more cold as winter. Simon, who was weak in physique, ran to the side and squatted. In front of Loya, an ice slide made of ice soared into the sky and directly connected to the 7th floor from the ground. Seeing this, Simon shook the silk thread on his hand beside him, reminding Loya that he was ready. When the people upstairs saw the slide appear, they also laughed slyly, and slid down the slide one by one. Boom! The head nurse's 300-pound chunk of meat had stepped on 2 deep pits in the soil. After standing firm, she took out the list that should be the case but was actually a script book, and smiled at everyone. How is it? Miss Ben is very talented in acting, right? Clap clap clap. Loya clapped and praised against his will. It's amazing, my head nurse. Then he turned around and continued to arrange the next step. Mingd, have you bought the plasma and minced meat? Mingd, who was holding a cane, held the nose of the plane high. Of course. I'm a gangster, and I'm very skilled at intimidation. Trust me. Okay. Loya shrugged, ignoring Mingdi's rich daily life. Simon came over just in time and scattered the woven buffer net. The corpse team has already set off. Let's go too. Okay. Loya nodded and greeted everyone to run towards the destination. For fear of being caught, Aludo almost tried his best to use his speed to ultimate. This move scared Minnie, almost jumped up. When did this big bear become so fast? If it wasn't ready before he arrived, wouldn't this surprise be in vain? Fortunately, some people in the elite camp who were faster than Aludo had already prepared everything before Aludo arrived at the cafeteria. From a distance, Minnie saw the destination of the trip. The dark and silent cafeteria was shrouded in the night, like a mythical creature, and the cool breeze came out from the direction of the cafeteria, giving people goosebumps. Kai. Aludo, who was running, stopped abruptly and plowed out 2 dirt pits on the ground with his feet. He looked at the cafeteria vigilantly, looking left and right. What's wrong? Minnie asked cautiously. This stupid big guy shouldn't have found anything, right? With a serious expression, Aludo gently placed his companions behind the big tree by the roadside. It smells bloody inside. It's not right. You wait here, I'll take a look. Well, since she hadn't discovered her own plan, Minnie breathed a sigh of relief. Her acting skills were bursting, with some self-comfort in her nervousness, and a bit of anxiety in her concern. Then be careful. It's a pity that Aludo's head can't understand such a profound acting skill. Well, I know. He nodded solemnly, armament hockey wrapped quietly, his body tense, ready to fire the iron block at any time. The curtains were drawn, and nothing could be seen from the outside. Squeak. Aludo pushed open the door, and the door of the cafeteria made an unpleasant screeching sound. He frowned slightly and looked around vigilantly. Walking into the cafeteria, the bloody smell became even stronger, and the disgusting stench entered his nose, and Aludo sneezed fiercely. Sneeze. Sneeze. Echoes appeared in the empty cafeteria, making it even more eerie. At this moment, a slight tremor awakened Aludo. It was a sound of pieces of meat rubbing on the ground, as a rice bucket. A senior foodie. Aludo was familiar with this voice. Who's there? Aldo took the stance of attacking and hardened himself with iron blocks. Aldo, is that Aldo? A weak voice came, accompanied by the sound of lungs pulling bellows. Mingd. The voice was so familiar, Aldo didn't care about defending, and rushed forward. Then when he saw Mingd, the whole person was stunned. Who did this? Aludo roared loudly, his eyes instantly turned to Yuhi, and his body exuded a strong murderous aura. At this time, Mingd started from the stomach, the lower body disappeared, and the blood of a gorilla Yuhi was dragged behind him, and the intestines and guts were rushing to the ground. Hearing Aludo's voice, Mingd reluctantly raised his head and looked at him with his only remaining eyes. His eyes were full of despair. Quick. Go to the courtyard. There are killers, lurking, come in. Killer. Chapter 90 Arudo's Birthday Banquet Part 2. Where did the killer come from? Aldo growled angrily, his whole body filled with terrifying murderous aura. At this time, the curtains facing the sea seemed to be blown up by the night wind, and the moonlight could not wait to get in through the gap. Aludo can finally see the inside of the cafeteria. But with just one look, this iron-struck man lost all his strength. I saw broken limbs and blood everywhere on the floor of the cafeteria, brightly colored balloons and ribbons scattered everywhere, in stark contrast with the blood of the orangutan Yuhi, and being in it was like being in hell. That shoe over there is from Keelung. That watch belongs to Lack. Those glasses belong to Cherry. Aludo was lost, and his eyes slowly swept across the cafeteria. Those familiar items have now left their owners, maybe not, who can tell. Anyway, it's a pile of minced meat. The curtains fell, and the dining hall fell into darkness again. On the roof of the cafeteria, Simon threw away the silk thread in his hand and waved the yellow flag in his hand towards the square. Loya, who was in charge of the mission, received the notification, took out the phone bug and dialed, "Hello. Minnie, you can leave the stage. Brother Jerome will be here soon." Okay. Outside the cafeteria, behind the big tree, Minnie hung up the phone bug and looked sympathetically in the direction of the cafeteria. She winked at her companions on the left and right, then opened her throat and howled. Ah! In the cafeteria, Aludo, who was struggling with grief, suddenly woke up when he heard this voice. Minnie. The rest are dead, so Minnie may be his last companions. Absolutely no accident. The extremely anxious Aludo's body instantly appeared by the wall, and with the sound of rumbling, a big hole was directly smashed into the canteen. Even used a shave. Minged, who was lying on the ground with the corpse in it, was startled and almost cried out. Have you ever seen a flying elephant? That's how Arudo felt to him at that moment. Minnie. The moment Aldo rushed out, Brother Jerome, disguised as men in black, pretended to be pulling Minnie's hair and dragged Minnie into the depths of the woods. Fuck, when did this bear become so fast? Minnie was startled, but she reacted immediately and said, Aludo. Help. Minnie. Aludo stabbed Yuhi in the eyes, bit Kiba and followed. The courtyard is the abbreviation for the training grounds of elite camp members. Because every member of the elite camp will live here, no one agrees with each other. No one can name this place, naturally there is no unified name, and they are all called by the courtyard. While on the way, Aldo lost track of Minnie. But he refused to give up, did not dare to give up, and chased in the direction the murderer left. Suddenly, the courtyard wall of the elite camp appeared in front of him. Looking at this place full of memories, Aludo stopped abruptly. Today, I was called by CP. At that time, the broken walls and scattered masonry had not been cleaned up, and were scattered on the lawn. What Arudo didn't expect was that battle at that time would be the last parting of life. Everyone. Aludo stared blankly at the broken masonry, then took a deep breath and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. I will avenge you. Squatting on the top floor of the wooden attic in the courtyard, Simon held his forehead weakly. By the way, doesn't he think we are all dead? He didn't think about you, pervert. Is it my fault? Loya reluctantly spread his hands. But that's fine, then save the scene where I was defeated. Inform Brother Jerome and led Aldo directly into the room. Understood. Seeing Simon go away in response, Loya turned his head away, stared at Aludo who was slowly approaching the courtyard, and said to himself, this fool. Without going through the inner corridor, Aludo jumped directly into the courtyard from the gap in the outer wall. On the grass, there was a fresh bloodstain extending all the way to the depths of the courtyard. On that cold grass, where is a black hairpin? Aludo ran over and picked it up. The hairpin belonged to Minnie, and he could still feel Minnie's body temperature and perfume. But at this moment, it was covered with blood, and the warm blood flowed down Arudo's hand. Minnie. Aludo held the hairpin tightly, his eyes became very dangerous. Brush. At this moment, a figure passed by and moved from one end of the courtyard to the other. Who is it? Aldo stood up, clenched his fists and chased after him. However, the opponent's speed was not something he could catch up with, and he was thrown away in just a few breaths. Arudo kicked the Jinchuriki column off with an angry kick, and roared, Who are you? Why did you kill my companion? But there was silence all around, as if there had never been a second person. Sudden click. The sound of the door closing was so harsh on this silent night. Aldo turned his head, but saw nothing. Damn it! Where is it? Aludo bit Kiba, and suddenly his head flashed. Wait, the voice just stopped at the end, which means that there is a problem with the structure of the door, and it can't be closed. There is only one room that meets this condition. Quote. Aludo turned around, stared in one direction, and then launched a collision, smashing the thin wooden fence, and heading straight towards the target. And not far behind him, Jerome's younger brother looked bewildered. This direction. Arudo is like this. Did he guess it? You don't need me to guide you, okay? I have to admit that at this moment, Aldo is like Conan's possession, and he found his target only through the slight difference in the sound of closing the door. He quickly ran outside the house and looked down. Sure enough, Madara's bloodstains could be seen on the floor in front of the door. Is it in there? When he did come to the door of the murderer, Arudo found himself calm. He took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and pushed open the door. Click. The electric light came on, and the blinding light made Aldo's eyes blurred for a while. Before he could see the house clearly, a big cake came right in his face. When pushing the door open, Aludo put his hands on his chest and set up a defensive frame. So when the cake came flying, he still kept that position. And then, slap. Surprise. Loya jumped out of the crowd, held up a big cake taller than himself, and smashed it in the face of Arudo, who was covered in paste. Hold the grass. Loya, stop it. Wait, that's the result of Ms. S.'s busy afternoon. Everyone was horrified and rushed forward in a hurry, trying to catch the cake. The dizzy situation soon improved, and Aldo clearly looked at his companions running towards him, his expression unchanged. But his eyes changed from cold, to dumb, then to anger, and finally Yuhi's eyes narrowed. Loya's plan was a success, Arudo's mood changed at the moment, and no actor could play it. Cake. Brother Jerome shouted anxiously, the two of them who love sweets are the two most worried people on the field, but the narrow room limits their performance, and they can only watch the cake fly farther and farther. Huh. Aludo's pupils turned upwards and saw a huge cake wider than the table coming towards him. The rest of the people are also looking at him. As long as he reaches out his hand now, he should be able to catch the cake. Sikasi. Boom. The few people who rushed forward stopped moving in an instant, and Arudo's two big hairy hands tightly pinned them in his arms. Slap. The cake fell and smashed onto the people who were huddled together, and the sky-filled cream fruit chan rained down on them. Cut. The rest of the crowd roared, and they didn't have to eat this time. Listening to the familiar voice in his ear and looking at the familiar faces in front of him, Aludo smiled and burst into tears. Everyone's all right. Really, great. Chapter 91 Domineering Practice, Seeking Collection, Seeking Recommendation. Navy Headquarters, the renovated training room. After spending a lot of money, Zephyr renovated this training room full of memories. Not only is the thickness of the walls thickened, but only high-quality materials are used for the materials selected during construction. The anti-shock, anti-compression and anti-strike ability is more than double that of the previous training room. Fortunately, Loya completed Heathful's mission before, which made the Navy's pockets a little bulging, otherwise Sengoku would definitely turn his face and let Zephyr roll as far as he could. At this moment, in the training room, Zephyr is guiding Loya to practice domineering. Because Loya has learned Return of Life, a move that requires extremely high body control, coupled with Loya's special physique, Zephyr decided to teach Loya armament hockey first. In the second half of the Great Route, that is, in the New World, there are many guys who can use domineering, and it is already a conventional power. This has led to the Navy must be equally domineering in order to fight against those big pirates. Otherwise, let alone carrying out the mission, I am afraid that passing their sight will have the worry of life. But unfortunately, it is extremely difficult to cultivate domineering. Generally, only the Navy with strength reaching the level of a colonel can roughly learn it. This is not the end, the strength of domineering also needs a lot of energy to improve. Just like Rocky and Beard that Roja met, the former's armament hockey could break through with just one move, while the latter had to use heavy lancers to penetrate his defense. This is the result of the difference in the strength of domineering. This ability cannot be as powerful as the devil fruit. Eating a piece of shit can gain powerful power. After learning it, it needs to be carved and polished repeatedly to become stronger. Even some domineering users, during the period of time they just learned, are not as powerful as their own bodies. That's why the Navy chooses to implement elite teaching. Compared with the number of people, they are not the opponents of pirates, but compared with the elite combat power, they will not be afraid of any enemy. In the three-color domineering, there is an ability called Conqueror's Hockey, which is more terrifying than the armed color and the knowledge color. This kind of domineering owner does not need to do anything, just use it to launch an attack. It is the aura of the user himself, and the attack power of Conqueror's Hockey only becomes stronger when the user becomes stronger. Facing this kind of domineering, the weak will have no room to resist, and will be stunned. But it is a pity that Conqueror's Hockey is innate, it cannot be acquired, nor can it be inherited from previous generations, it can only be determined by fate. There is only 1 in a million people, and those who can awaken are extremely rare, so those who can use Conqueror's Hockey are extremely rare. In the New World, Conqueror's Hockey is called the qualification of the king. Whether or not anyone in the Navy will use Conqueror's Hockey is not clear to Loya. However, in the original book, the leader Green Pepper once said that in the New World, there are as many characters who will use Conqueror's Hockey as the Crucian carp crossing the river. That is the number brought by the huge base of pirates. However, since those pirates who are generally weaker than the naval generals can awaken Conqueror's Hockey, then in the Navy, there must be people who will use Conqueror's Hockey, but for unknown reasons, no one will expose it in front of people. Armament Hockey, its defense and attack power are not only related to your proficiency, the only way to improve it is to improve your own physical strength. Zephyr has taken off his shirt at this moment, revealing a hideous scar. His hands turned black to the elbows, giving Loya an inexplicable sense of danger. You don't need me to say more about your physical strength, but you have to remember that no matter how strong your domineering is, it is only an ability, a weapon, and only your body is the most basic strength. Loya nodded in agreement. Just like the situation on the daughter island of Empress Hancock, although there, as long as the inhabitants of the island are warriors, they will almost always armament hockey. But their domineering strength is not to mention competing with the big pirates of the New World. I am afraid that Zoro, who has just left the East China Sea, will be able to cut and play. This is a real example of insufficient physical strength and insufficient domineering strength. Seeing that Roja seemed to understand, Zephyr nodded with satisfaction, raised the prosthetic limb, and handed it to Roja. I said just now that the use of armament hockey is generally divided into 2 types, winding and hardening. Now my prosthesis is black, do you think I used entanglement or hardening? Wound and hardened, right? Loya replied cautiously. The next second, Zephyr smashed him to the ground with a fist. Did I tell the dog just half an hour ago? Zephyr roared while suppressing the anger in his heart. I said, armament hockey can only be used for rapping. Rapping is about strength. When your domineering is strong enough, covering when the density is high enough, the object rapped with domineering will naturally be hardened. Including the hardening ability on my other hand, I just wrap the domineering on my hand, and the hardening is completed. Why don't you understand such a simple truth? Luoya, who got up from the ground, rolled the eyes of the dead fish. The teacher was always confused, and he didn't remember what he said. What should I do? It's a hurry to wait online. But immediately he continued to stand up and be taught by Zephyr. Regardless of whether Zephyr is old and confused, what he is talking about is the experience summed up by countless predecessors with blood and sweat. This knowledge is invaluable in a world where energy is used crudely to rudimentary. Armament hockey's practice actually doesn't require much skill. In addition to physical strength, the rest is just winding and winding. Once you have cultivated armament hockey and you can simply wrap it around your hands or objects, it will be your first glimpse. At this time, you can come into contact with the entity of the natural fruit ability, just like when Dusky cut the Snow Maiden. Next, it is possible to achieve high-density winding, so that the domineering can form a black compartment on the body surface and objects, and it is the real master armament hockey. The rest, covering the domineering all over the body, and even spreading it to the surrounding objects, and hardening the objects in the air, there is not much improvement in the realm, just the difference between the pure strength and the background. Just like the difference between an old driver and a new driver, if someone sends a TL4***51Y, the old driver will understand it instantly. The new driver has to ask, "What is this? Which country's new missile?" Zephyr explained to Loya incessantly. He hadn't been so cheerful for a long time. Luoya is not only strong, but also highly savvy, and has perseverance for cultivation. It is common for him to stay in the training room for a month. Where can I find such a perfect disciple? It wasn't until his mouth was dry that Zephyr stopped talking. He glanced at Loya, and finally reminded, "I won't repeat the problem of melee combat. But I want to remind you that most of your fruit abilities are medium and long-range attacks. Before you can skillfully carry out entanglement, don't think about getting armament hockey entangled in ranged attacks. That's not something you can reach right now." Hearing this, Loya touched the back of his head embarrassedly. Because what Zephyr said was exactly what he was thinking. Think about it, the ice dragon's roar is a big move, wrapped around armament hockey. That power, tisk tisk, is so terrifying. Chapter 92 Kuzan returns. Zephyr deserves to be the chief instructor of the department. This position is not only because of his former general status and strong strength. Sengoku has to arrange for him. This position is a reflection of Zephyr's teaching ability. After a few short exchanges, he could see the thoughts in Loya's heart. Seeing the embarrassed look on Loya's face, Zephyr smiled and shook his head. "Forget it, that's what I'll say. You should consider getting started first. If you can't learn it, it won't help you to say more." "Yes." A few days later, the large port of the naval headquarters. A warship came slowly from a distance and slowly docked in the port. The Navy in charge of logistics took the tools and trotted to the front of the warship, ready to record the date of the warship's entry into port, and to ask whether it needed maintenance. Pat. This is the sound of leather shoes stepping on the slate. The Navy lowered his head and wrote something in the notebook, looked up at the scratches on the warship, and asked, "What is serious injury? Have you been attacked?" "Assault. No, probably. Just hit an iceberg." "I hit the iceberg, just." The corner of the Navy's mouth twitched, and he turned his head to see who the man was holding. But at a glance, the whole person was stunned. Click. The pencil in his hand was broken by him unconsciously, and half of it fell on the instep. Being hit by a pencil, he woke up tense, his right foot stomped hard on the spot, straightened his back, and quickly raised his right hand to his forehead, hitting his forehead with a muffled sound. "Admiral Iokiji." "Wow. What?" "General." The busy Navy around looked at this side fiercely, and sure enough, the figure standing on the stone steps of the port, yawning, with one hand in his trousers kabuto, is not one of the three generals, Iokiji. The busy port became quiet in just a few breaths, and after a few seconds, only the neat standing stomping was heard, forming a sound. "General Iokiji." For a time, only this voice echoed throughout the entire port. "Ah la la, everyone is in good spirits." Kuzan yawned, glanced at the Navy, then shook his hand and turned away. After he left, the captain of the warship was carried down the ladder by his subordinates. The bandages wrapped around his body and the smell of undissipated gunpowder told others why he appeared at this time. Looking at the back of Qingzi walking farther and farther, the admiral wept excitedly. Thank you for this journey. Huh, Teacher Kuzan is back. Loya put down the exercise equipment in his hand and took out a sweat towel to wipe the sweat from his forehead. The big man standing beside him was Zephyr. Didn't he go to the East China Sea on a mission? Why did he come back so quickly? It is conceivable that tasks that require generals to take action are generally extremely difficult. Moreover, this world is inconvenient for transportation, and it is very difficult to navigate by sea. Under such dual conditions, generally speaking, it will take several months for the generals to perform their tasks. Just like Akainu and Kizaru, one of them went to the New World and the other went to the South China Sea, and it took them 4 or 5 months to come back. Then, how long until Kuzan left? A full 2 months. Facing Loya's inquiry, Zephyr remembered something and looked at him strangely. You don't know. Forget it. He asked you to go to the small square tonight. I think it should be to evaluate your practice results in the past few months. Every once in a while, Zephyr will do the same to ensure the progress of the disciples, practice and answer their doubts. So his speculation should be correct, but what the hell did you omit? Loya complained in his heart, but then immediately gave up the study. Zephyr didn't want to say. Could he still force the other party to say it? Will be killed. No, he will go to the hospital. Absolute. Thinking of what happened to him that day after he stole 2 top cigars from Zephyr and was discovered, Loya shuddered and stood at attention and saluted. Yes, I see. What the hell are you excited about? Zephyr was stunned. At night, the small square of the Navy headquarters. The bright moonlight sprinkled on the newly replaced stone slabs in the square, making the pattern of the Madara bark on it clearly visible in the night. Not far away, a patrolling navy was calling Heish and was about to take a nap, when he heard the sound of Tatata's footsteps approaching. The confused spirit immediately sobered up. The navy raised his gun and shouted in a deep voice, "Who is there? Come out." "Hi, Will, you're being lazy again today." A familiar voice came from around the corner. The navy who was called Will breathed a sigh of relief, and then patted the back of his head embarrassedly. "Hey, this is not made by the mother-in-law at home. I know that I have to keep vigil today." His expression was very embarrassing, as if someone was scratching his foot, but the words he said were still rascal. In this regard, Loya could only helplessly shrug his shoulders, and then teased him. "Your waist is not good, your kidneys are deficient, you have to make up for it." Who has a kidney deficiency? Will suddenly turned Yuhi's face and retorted loudly with flickering eyes. "Hey. I didn't expect it to explode." Loya smiled wickedly and hooked Will's shoulders. "I'll tell you a recipe, and I promise you will be fierce in the future. Your wife will be defeated." "Really?" Will said eagerly, his eyes lit up. "Of course it's true." At the moment, Loya is like a counterfeit medicine seller. The corner of his mouth is wretched and has a fight with Kizaru. "Come here, I'll tell you." The two of them crossed their shoulders and giggled for a while before Will left contentedly. At the same time, he made a promise to Loya that as long as it was effective, the gift would be indispensable. Following Loya's words, as time went on, after a few months, Sengoku found that many navies in the headquarters looked at their goats differently. Although they didn't do anything, they were always staring at its ass. The frightened poor little guy can't even drag it out of the office. Not long after Will left, an ice spear appeared behind Loya, aimed directly at the back of his head. Snapped. Loya didn't look back, his head dodged the fatal attack. Then he quickly raised his right hand and grabbed the flying ice spear. "Don't give me Obito's specialties, don't even say hello when we meet." Loya nibbled at the ice cube in his hand, crunching in his mouth. "You make me very sad as a disciple." "Ah, Mr. Kuzan. Ah la la, that's really sorry." The familiar languid male voice echoed in the empty alley, and Luo Ya's eyes flashed, and Kuzan in a small white suit appeared in front of him. Kuzan's hands stretched forward, His left hand grabbed on his right wrist, aiming at Loya. Because next, I have to do even more extreme things. Childish mouth. Tweet. A huge ice bird composed of cold ice shot out from Kuzan's hand, and rushed towards Loya with a lingering chill. Ah! Facing this sudden attack, Loya was stunned at first, and then sneered at the corner of his mouth. Then let's see, who is more extreme, Mr. Kuzan. Ice make reloaded lancers. Boom. Explosion, crushed ice, rowdy navy, lit lights. Countless elements condensed at this moment to become the most attached picture scroll of Loya. After all, Loya is a transmigrator, and the transmigrators of other people may keep their memories of the past, and then they can calmly integrate into the new world. Loya didn't know how they did it, but he couldn't. He was always alone, as if he was watching TV. Even if he was there, it was just a 3D movie. But fortunately, he met the flying squirrel, met Kuzan, and met many, many people who he could rely on. Let him know that he is not alone in this world. Chapter 93 Teacher and Apprentice Night Talk. After the battle, the clothes were a little shattered, but Kuzan, who was still unscathed, sat side by side with the bruised Loya, watching Malin Fodor, who was slowly calming down. Kuzan's first goal has been achieved, and Loya's strength does not need to be said. He has already proved himself in the battle just now. In the 2 months since he left, Loya still maintained the terrifying growth rate of his training under him, and now even he has to be serious to defeat Loya. This training speed made Kuzan very satisfied, and even more satisfied that Loya did not continue to develop his own moves, which was really good. But, thinking of what Sengoku told him during the day, and the group of patients still lying in the hospital, he had a headache again. Hello, Loya. Well, what's wrong? Loya tilted her head to look at Kuzan. Her swollen eyes could only open a line at the moment, looking very funny. But Kuzan couldn't laugh. He rested his chin with his hand and said softly, I heard that you sacked the CP people. Is this true? Geek. Sure enough, it was because of this. Loya sighed inwardly. Before coming, he had this guess. Although Zephyr told himself on the same day that he should not tell anyone what happened, it was all up to him to argue with the censors of the world government. The fewer people who knew, the better the situation would be for him. But facing his teacher, Loya's conscience told him that it was wrong to conceal. Before coming, the trays were already prepared. After being silent for a while, Loya took a deep breath and said, yes. Even the least injured Rob Lucci, I am afraid that the road to growth in the future will be blocked by me, and he is considered a waste. Then, he told Kuzan exactly what happened that day. After listening to Loya's words, Kuzan's arm with his chin suddenly turned into ice, and the chilly air overflowed in the air. He looked at Loya in a dignified tone and looked at Loya angrily. You know. You poke what a big basket. Feeling the chill on Kuzan's body, Loya was a little dumbfounded, then shook his head and smiled bitterly. Although it is stupid to make excuses for my actions, but I still have to defend myself. Having said this, Loya's eyes became very firm, and he stared at Kuzan without any timidity. Dare to hurt my companion, no matter who it is, I will not let him go. Indeed. This is you. Kuzan thought absent-mindedly, not knowing how to continue the admonition. For a while, the scene was quiet and a little terrifying. Loya abolished the CP people. This time the problem is really big. The 5 old stars did not expect that the new elite camp chief who has been in the limelight recently would be so ruthless. You must know that CP is not a simple espionage organization. It more represents the face of the world government, the face of the Tianlong people. Pirates may not care about the twists and turns, but as the Navy, as a subordinate agency of the world government, how can they ignore it? Originally, the 5 old stars were only going to beat the Navy to show their attitude. You can take care of the matter of the Tianlong people, and I will pretend. Although I don't support them, I don't want to get involved in this troublesome matter. You can solve it in private. Therefore, the 5 veterans do not mind whether the outcome of this beating is a winner or a loser, as long as they show their attitude so that the senior Navy can understand. this is the real reason for the mobilization of CP. After all, it is the headquarters of the Navy, and even the strength of this organization must be treated with caution. But no one expected that things would develop to the later stage. Not only a large number of CP members were abolished, but even Rob Lucci, the strongest in CP 9,800 years, had 2 fingers cut off. It's getting serious now. Because the object is Rob Ludge. Rob Lucci, who is only 24 years old this year, is in a golden period of rising, and his future achievements are limitless. As a result, it was so crippled. No matter what power, there is an incomparable desire for talents. The naval headquarters is like this, and the world government is also like this. The members who can be selected into CP are all precious talents without exception, and Lucci is the treasure among the treasures. As a result, it was damaged in the Navy headquarters. If it wasn't for the commander-in-chief of the whole army to press down on it and talk to the Tianlong people, I am afraid that the current Loya has already been arrested by the angry people above. This is to start with the reserve force of the friendly army, and the nature is extremely bad. The most terrible thing is that anyone who has read the original book knows that Rob Lucci was ordered to seize the ancient weapon Pluto, which has been lurking in the capital of Seven Waters for a year at this point in time. Regarding ancient weapons, Kuzan just heard about it, but he didn't know the details. But the world government knows that, they are the ones who gave the order. In order to make sure nothing goes wrong, and to please the top, the bald officials privately encouraged the CP officials, and also brought Kaku and Kabbalah among the people who went with them this time. These are all lurkers. Now one is in a coma, with comminuted fractures and severe frostbite, and the other has an amputated limb and is in a wheelchair. It is conceivable that even if Lucci goes back, facing the disappearance of Kaku and Kabbalah and Lucci's fingers being cut off, Iceberg will definitely be suspicious. You said that you went back to your hometown, and then met the pirates, so coincidental. You are not weak. Now Lukaik does not have the prestige when the Straw Hat appeared, which makes Iceberg more trustworthy. Therefore, in the face of Iceberg's suspicion, this mission has a great possibility of failure, depending on Lucci's acting skills cannot save the world. It was precisely because of these 2 things that Lucci was alone that he felt outraged at Loya, who was the initiator. At the same time, being kept in mind by Wu Laoxing and Tianlongren, the situation that Loya has to face can be imagined. The same goes for the pressure on the Navy headquarters. After a long silence, Kuzan suddenly laughed lightly. Loya looked at him blankly, not knowing what he thought. However, Kuzan ignored it and smiled to himself. From the beginning of a small chuckle, the voice gradually increased, and finally turned into a big laugh. Ha 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 ha. From the beginning, Loya was dazed, and became more and more calm. In the end, he rolled the eyes of the dead fish and quietly watched Kuzan perform. Ah! Kuzan swept Loya's line of sight, and the laughter stopped abruptly. He coughed lightly, wiped off the slight embarrassment on his face, then looked at Loya seriously, and said, "Don't act so impulsive in the future." This time, from the primary and secondary point of view, CP and the others are at a loss. After all, they acted without authorization. Going for trouble without notifying us, leaving us with wiggle room. Quote. But your correspondence is really too much. Think about your peers, you are indeed strong, you are growing fast, and you have enough confidence to ignore the hidden pressure from the world government, but what about them? Kuzan didn't explain the words, and the smart Loya still understood what he meant. Yes, what about them? In the face of the situation where Loya can't help, what they will do, Loya can imagine. Loya couldn't help but start to reflect on his behavior, after all. Black Wrist Zepha is a living example. I see, Mr. Kuzan. Looking at Loya bowing his head, Kuzan sighed in his heart, he is such a cheap apprentice, he is really troublesome. There is absolutely no way to let this matter go, and there will be more troubles in the future. However, he has already made a decision in his heart. In any case, this disciple, he is safe. Things between men are sometimes that simple. If you accept it, you will risk your life to protect it. Chapter 94 Dragon's Body and Domineering, the third update. Please recommend, please collect. I have a hunch that my liver is going to hurt. Speaking of which, Kuzan stood up and was about to leave, but he immediately scratched his head and turned back. Do you know that Mr. Zephyr is going to form a pirate guerrilla team? Huh, what? Loya looked up suddenly and looked at Kuzan in disbelief. Form a pirate guerrilla team. Isn't that what will happen in 2 years? Loya practiced so desperately, and wanted to avenge Zephyr, so that he could let go of his hatred and not set foot on the ending in the original book is also an important purpose. What did he hear? Zephyr is going to form a pirate guerrilla team. Why didn't he tell me? Loya said anxiously, suddenly stood up and walked in the other direction. No, I'm going to ask to understand. Kuzan looked at Loya's appearance, his eyes were calm, and he whispered to himself, sure enough, you know a lot, Loya. Then he threw out an ice spear, preventing Loya from moving forward. What? Roha asked eagerly after jumping to avoid the ice spear. I should ask you this question, what are you doing? Kuzan said in a deep voice, what are you trying to do? Stop a man from taking revenge. Do you know that doing so will not only make Teacher Zephyr disappointed in you, but also it can make him angry. Even if it is death, he will not allow you to avenge him. If it is as Kuzan guessed, then Loya's purpose is obvious. He wants to avenge Zephyr. But he wouldn't agree, absolutely not. This is the first time the two have brought this matter to light, and Kuzan decided not to investigate how Loya knew so much about Akatsuki for the time being, but he had to stop Loya. This is the duty of an admiral, and this is a promise to a teacher as a disciple. I can avenge him. Just give me a little more time. Loya shouted loudly. Yes. Just a little time, a year, no, half a year. I will definitely help Zephyr. Teacher newspaper. Boom. Before Loya finished speaking, Kuzan's lips trembled with anger. He came to him in an instant, and punched him into the ground with a fist. Then he stepped on Loya's head and scolded, you avenge him. What are you? Don't I have the qualifications for you? Speaking of this, Kuzan suddenly felt a little disappointed. He let go of his feet, took a deep breath, and suppressed his anger. Remember, Loya, the man's business must be solved by himself. Even if it is death, he will not allow himself to be sympathized with. This is the fate of the men in the sea. If it were you, you would let others help revenge yourself. Loya was dumbfounded by what Kuzan said. He pulled his head out of the ground and sat on the ground. Kuzan thought he had figured it out, and was about to offer some relief. However, he found that through the bangs that had not been trimmed for many days and covered his eyes, Loya's eyes were still so firm. I really can't do it. However, I will definitely do it. I will definitely let Mr. Zephyr say that. Kuzan asked subconsciously, what? Loya raised her head and stared into Yuhi's eyes. Let him say, please help me, Loya. Kuzan was stunned for a moment, then shook his head with a sneer, his tone fluctuating. You have to let others do what you can't do yourself. He picked up the coat that had just fallen on the ground and put it on his shoulders. Then I'll be waiting for your good news, Christopher Loya. After that, Kuzan turned and left, leaving Loya alone, watching the night alone. A month later, in a special training room, Loya stood in the center of the field, closed his eyes, and focused all his attention on his fists. At this moment, in Loya's hand down, an inexplicable breath wrapped around it, giving people a feeling of extreme danger. Suddenly, Loya suddenly opened his eyes and shouted in a low voice. Hardened. Hum. Like a magical vibration, there was a hum in the air. The wisp of breath floating in his hands immediately began to compress and condense, and in the blink of an eye, Loya's hands became pitch black. It's just different from the rich black of Zephyr. The black on Loya's hand is a little light at this moment. It doesn't look like it gives a hard feeling, but smooth. Between the blacks, wisps of dark blue lines dotted the interior, as if several blue lightning bolts cut through the night sky, leaving behind a gorgeous trail. Bang! Loya slammed his fists together, and there was a sound of steel plates hitting from the position of contact. Haha, I really am a genius. Looking at the black and blue in his hands, Loya smiled happily. Domineering, after all, is just a manifestation of energy. People in the world of One Piece are not familiar with the use of energy, especially the flow of energy inside and outside the body. That feeling is unfamiliar to almost everyone. But Loya is different, not to mention that he is a transmigrator. He has read all kinds of cultivation methods, and his current status as a dragon slayer wizard makes him easy to control energy. This innate advantage made Loya's progress in learning armament hockey very fast, even faster than his learning of 6 forms, so fast that Zephyr was desperate. In fact, it only took a week for Loya to initially learn how to stimulate his domineering, and he was able to succeed 9 times out of 10. Then it only took half a month for him to take a big step from initial winding to completing hardening. This speed is jaw-dropping and shocking. Sengoku, who knew the situation, immediately issued a gag order to Loya. At the same time, he couldn't hide his excitement, and walked back and forth in the office several times in excitement. The Navy has been getting worse every few years. If there is no Loya, the strongest recruit in this session should be Hanza. Although it didn't reach the level of the previous sessions of Aokiji Kayabashi, it was still no problem to catch up with the problem child Smog's session. But unfortunately, Hanza couldn't carry out a high-intensity battle. Therefore, in terms of average combat power, this session has indeed reached the lowest score in history. But these are the situations if Loya hadn't shown up. Now Loya not only showed up, but showed such a dreaded talent. The new generation of Navy is about to rise. How can you make Sengoku unhappy? With the existence of Loya, the high-level criticism of Zephyr will be less in the future. You don't have to be nervous about recruiting new recruits. After another 10 or 8 years, if a general abdicates, Loya can also make up for it. This is a good thing. That night, Sengoku thought a lot. However, to say that the real reason why Loya practiced armament hockey by leaps and bounds is actually not simply due to Loya's system. Don't forget, in order to practice the 6 forms, Luoyake has not stepped out of the door of the training room for a month. The same is true of this practice of domineering. And in order to avoid distraction, Loya even refused Zephyr to instruct him to practice observation hockey at the same time, focusing on armament hockey. Luck, talent, strength, and patience, all of which Loya possesses, will naturally go a long way in practice. However, in the rest of the time, Loya soon discovered that his armed color hardening seemed to have entered a bottleneck, not that the progress was slow, but that he could not advance at all. Zephyr guessed that it may be that Loya's physical strength has developed to ultimate, and he cannot further strengthen his domineering strength in a short time. But he didn't believe it when he said it, and it can only be used as a reference opinion. After all, Loya's physical strength does not need any doubts, and I am afraid that even the 16th Lieutenant General of the headquarters will not be able to keep up. And among the 16th Lieutenant Generals of the headquarters, who would dare to say that his armament hockey strength has reached the saturation point? Since this is the case, then Loya's problem is naturally not in this aspect, but there is this possibility. After Loya's careful comprehension, and Zephyr's discussion and guidance, helping to understand, Loya quickly found the reason. It turned out that his dragon body and domineering conflicted with each other. Loya, who came to this conclusion, directly asked the black question mark, and was reluctant to repeatedly verify that he finally believed it. The body of a dragon, as the name suggests, is the body of a dragon. This skill refers to the degree to which the body of the Loana gradually changes into the physique of a dragon. The ghost knows why, the part of Loya is still the human part, or the proportion, which can accommodate armament hockey, but the part that already belongs to the dragon is not allowed to be contaminated at all. This is embarrassing. Therefore, in the remaining half-month, Loya was not so much cultivating, but actually creating. Create a way to make the dragon's body accept domineering. Chapter 95 Cultivation and Fighting Part 1. The boost provided by Dragon Body for Loya is indeed strong, but the effect of Armament Haki is not weak. If the two can be combined into one, the increase in strength will not be 1 + 1, but most likely 10*10. This made Loya unable to give up the practice of Armament Haki. Thinking about how you will fight in the future, after using the pseudo-dragon transformation, the scales of the whole body are covered with a domineering black ink. How domineering it must be. Do not think about the defensive power of Dragon Scale. If it is combined with Armament Haki, how terrifying the defensive effect will be. It's not a dream to see Hakai Mahawk's slash as nothing. But, where should we start? From the very beginning of creation, Loya's thinking was deadlocked. After omitting the details of his own situation that he could not say, he discussed with Zephyr. The experienced Zephyr quickly came up with a solution, but it was a bit simple and crude. Zephyr said, since the part of your body that belongs to the dragon is repelling domineering, then you can use the part of your body that belongs to the dragon to cultivate domineering. Indeed, fusion is always better than differentiation. Loya, who is a Chinese citizen, can give 7 or 8 examples of this with his heels. But this method sounds simple, but it is actually very difficult to operate. Not to mention that there has never been such a situation in the world of One Piece that the body resists domineering. In terms of domineering, it is only a human power. It is cultivated with the human body as a template and has nothing to do with dragons. However, Loya did have an explosion of ideas. Because the master returned his life, he was able to observe his physical condition in detail, and even the deformed Longwei could be inspired. Coupled with the innate advantages in energy utilization as a traverser and a magician, Loya quickly concluded a set of methods worth trying. He found that in addition to the different structure of his body's cell level, the main force in his body to resist domineering is actually just the power of the dragon. There is no doubt about how domineering the power of the dragon in the fairy tale is. In the world of One Piece, the power of domineering is also synonymous with fierceness. When two forces that do not belong to the same system appear in the same place, they will naturally resist each other. If it weren't for the fact that the level of Loya's dragon's strength was not high enough to carry out a comprehensive counterattack in his body, it might be that Loya couldn't even cultivate a trace of domineering. So Loya decided to listen to Zephyr's words and try to combine the power of the dragon with domineering. With the power of the dragon as the nourishment, the body of the dragon is the soil, the magic power of destroying the dragon is the light, and the domineering that has been cultivated is the seed. A new kind of domineering is cultivated, which is unique to oneself. This method seems feasible, and only he knows the danger in it. A little careless, the power of the dragon counterattacks, that feeling. Looking back at the decline of Natsu every time he exploded, he would know. Luckily, Loya managed to accomplish this feat without a hitch. Luckily, he himself felt beyond words. He not only solved the problem that the body of the dragon could not be wrapped around domineering, but also integrated his armament Haki with the magic of ice attribute Dragon Slayer and a little dragon power. This made Loya's hands so gorgeous at the moment, and strips of dark blue lightning were intertwined. Loya could feel that after using domineering, a majestic power continued to emerge from his body and blessed him in his hand. He looked at the blue and black domineering in his hand, freezing the moisture in the surrounding air, making it foggy. For now, that's it. A few days later, the arena. Loya's strength has risen too terrifyingly. Navy headquarters, inside the arena. The person who spoke was Simon, who was watching the battle from the outside. At this moment, he stared absently at the two people who were fighting violently back and forth on the field, and opened his mouth. Hearing the words, the surrounding companions nodded with complicated expressions. Some of them had a dazed look on their faces, as if they had not yet recovered from the battle in front of them. Already, not on the same level at all. Loya, who dares to go on to say he's a recruit? At this moment, the members of the elite battalion are secretly hurting themselves. This kind of gap, which is completely invisible, makes this group of them, who are hailed as monsters by ordinary recruits, feel ashamed. At the beginning, they could still see Loya's back, looking at his back, but now, Loya has already walked in front of everyone. No, in front of most people on this sea. The entire field has now completely turned into an ice age. Ling Lai's cold air spreads around without hesitation. It is obviously the most sultry weather in late summer, but it makes the people present have the illusion of falling into an ice cave. Countless icicles are like jungles, growing on the thick ice field, and strong vibrations sound from time to time, making these hard as iron icicles like biscuits, easily broken. Boom! Suddenly, the two figures crossed each other, and the air let out a scream. The resulting air explosion was like a storm, spreading out in circles, and the gust of wind that rolled up even creaked the ice on the ground, and the next second seemed to be crushed. Cut! An old man still has such power. Roha, who flew out, felt the stinging pain from his fist, and rubbed Kiba Hanako. At this moment, Loya has activated the pseudo-dragonization skill, and the blue dragon scales all over his body shine in the sunlight. Then an ice wall instantly appeared behind him and stepped on it with both feet. Bang! The ice wall was instantly smashed by his terrifying strange force, and the powerful reaction force pushed him like a launched missile, rushing towards Zepha. Pick me up again, Teacher Zepha. Landing on the ground, Zepha, who did not expect Loya's current strength, took a few steps back with an ugly face, venting the inertia brought by the fight. After standing firm, before turning his head, a feeling of being locked flooded into his heart. So soon, is it possible to use observation hockey roughly? Zepha grinned, not knowing whether he was angry or laughing. The momentum on his body suddenly skyrocketed again. Step, turn, twist, punch. The jet-black fist was aimed at Loya and attacked mercilessly. Don't blame me for going to the hospital. Roha's eyes are calm in the forward charge, and the ice attribute Dragon Slayer magic allows him to maintain a calm state at any time. He knew that Zepha had still released water at this time, otherwise he would have already lost. But in the same way, he knew that Zepha wouldn't have much room to release water, and now his move will definitely knock him out. After all, Zepha, who is old and hard to heal from secret illnesses, can't be as strong as when he was young, and he can still maintain his peak state after 3 hours of high-intensity battles. And himself, with the powerful resilience of the Dragon Slayer, in just 3 hours, he had no impact at all. What's more, he also opened the pseudo-dragon skill. So, hardened. Loya's fist became pitch black, and lightning-like dark blue patterns appeared on his hands. 6 Kings and Gun Change Chongfang. An inexplicable aura wrapped around his fist. Although it was not as good as the 6 Kings Absolute Spear that Loya used when he kept still, the creepy feeling deeply penetrated into the hearts of everyone present. Then, Loya took a deep breath, and the soreness on his arm told him that this triple blessing could not be maintained for too long. Ice Dragons. Frost Fist. Roar. A punch was thrown out, like the sky was falling apart. Zepha seemed to really hear a dragon roar, and the Loya in front of him became blurred, and what reappeared in front of him was a huge ice dragon roaring at him. This is... Suddenly, Zepha was shocked and noticed a trace of abnormality. But before he could continue to think, the two fists slammed together. And then, really, the sky was shattered. Chapter 96 Cultivation and Fighting Part 2. Boom. The earth is torn apart, the sky is frozen, and the scene is like the end of the world. There was no way to make any resistance, and the members of the elite battalion were blown away. Where the fists meet, there is an explosion like a thunderclap. The terrifying cold air erupted in an unprecedented manner, rapidly spreading in the shocked eyes of Flying Squirrel and the others. It's like freezing the world. There were ravines several meters wide on the ground, and before the stones and soil fell, they were frozen by the cold wind, forming strips of ice, which hung on the edge of the cliff. Who won? It won't be Loya. The Flying Squirrel put the scabbard on the ground to prevent himself from being blown away, raised his head and looked at the center of the dusty field, his eyes flickering. Suddenly, the Flying Squirrel's eyes widened. No. Teacher Zepha is fine. This breath is Loya. Brush. A figure soared into the sky, like a blue lightning bolt, so dazzling in the dusty battlefield. At this moment, Loya only felt a numbness in his arm, not only because of the side effect after using the 30% superposition, but also because of the impact he received just now. So that's the case. Is this the strength of a pure physique admiral? Then, how strong should Tekken Garp be? Loya frowned, marveling at Zepha's power. He originally thought that Zepha, who could be defeated by Luffy 2 years after the big event in the original book, no matter how strong he was, would not make him feel unmatched now. But he was wrong, so wrong. He didn't know why Zepha 6 years later would be so weak that he was defeated by a 19-year-old Luffy who had been at sea for more than 2 years. But now Zepha, strong is simply a monster. The seemingly plain punch just now, the moment Loya touched it, the burst of power made his heart palpitate. That was obviously just a punch that belonged to a normal attack. Not only did it instantly dispel the shockwave of his revised skills of the Six Kings, but it also caused his dragon-slaying magic to be defeated. The feeling that the magic power was stuck in his fist, but couldn't be released, was so suffocating, it almost made him suffocate a mouthful of blood. If it weren't for the fact that Zepha stopped moving due to unknown reasons, he would have been in the hospital as Zepha said. Stepping on the moon step, Loya stood calmly in the air. Although he was beaten by Zepha, Zepha will definitely not feel better at the moment. Luoya won't let the water go because the other party is his own teacher. Since Zepha has stopped moving, then, take advantage of your illness to kill you. He pushed the fist covered with armament haki, and mercilessly pushed the shock wave and the power of the ice dragon into Zepha's body. Even if he was stronger than Zepha, he would still be skinned if he didn't die. Ha 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 ha. Under the smoke, Zepha laughed very loudly. Call. An unknown wind blew away the smoke and dust, revealing Zepha with blood on the corners of his mouth. At this moment, Zepha is indeed not very good. The power of Roha's Six Kings Absolute Spear is enough to smash steel. Even the one-handed move developed to maintain mobility is enough to instantly smash people into scum when placed on ordinary people. Although Zepha is not an ordinary person, he is still a normal human being. The shock wave pierced through his body and nearly shattered his internal organs. Not to mention that there is an extreme ice dragon power that penetrates into his body and freezes. At this moment, his entire arm and most of his body connected to his right hand are covered with ice crystals, like ice armor. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Zepha wrapped himself with the rich armament haki to resist the cold air, otherwise he would have already frozen into popsicles. Zepha waved his conscious left hand, and the air he brought up blew away the smoke and dust, and looked up at Loya in the air. This brat is already so strong. Loya was a little confused by Zepha's laugh, but the battle they had agreed to was not over yet, and now was not the time to be distracted. Feeling the change in Loya's momentum, Zepha's face gradually became solemn. Yes, as promised, whoever loses the ability to resist will end the battle. This is the rule proposed by Loya, saying that it is to completely squeeze his own power. As a teacher, Zepha certainly would not ignore this condition. Feeling the magic in his body, Loya frowned. Oops, the magic is about to bottom out. In the past few hours, Loya used the pseudo-dragonization skill 3 times intermittently, almost squeezing his potential to ultimate. As long as the magic power recovers to a certain stage, the skills in Zepha will be turned on. By now, the last trace of magic power is about to be exhausted. He glanced around the field and finally settled on Kuzan with his hands in Kabuto. If only I could find something to eat now. Loya thought, but this is just an extravagant hope. Looking at Zepha, who was staring at him below, Loya believed that if he went down now, there would only be one result. Then, let's decide the winner with one move. Loya in the sky puffed out his cheeks, and a man-high blue circle appeared in front of him. Hey, Loya didn't use that trick. The stand. No, the place that has turned into frozen soil. The flying squirrel stared at the familiar blue magic circle in front of Loya, and the corners of his eyes twitched. As Loya's long-term friend, and the first person to meet Loya, how could he not know the terrorist attack that Loya spit out of his mouth? That is Roha's strongest attacking skill, and it is a fierce killer move that Kuzan, who is an ice attribute ability, can ignore ordinary physical attacks and dare not take it hard. I'd better stay away. Flying Squirrel thought, decisively moved to the elite battalion members with Xiao, grabbed 2 guys, and used Xiao to keep away from the battlefield. At the same time, his voice remained in the air, run. The rest of the members were stunned for a moment, then came back to their senses, and retreated to the rear, crawling and running. The Flying Squirrel took time to look at the disabled Mukuro in the arena behind him, and shook his head regretfully. After this time, I'm afraid this place will be leveled and renovated. Watching his companions leave, Loya breathed a sigh of relief, then opened his mouth wide and spewed out endless ice. Ice dragons. Roar. The ice that escaped from the mouth and the magic circle quickly expanded from the size of a fist to a width of more than 10 meters. In an instant, the ice storm that covered the sky and the sun rushed down with endless fierceness. The monstrous ice storm surged away, as if to freeze everything. The storm was still far away, and Zephyr felt the temperature of the air plummet again, reaching freezing point. Even taking a breath, the thermal airflow leaving the body didn't have the chance to turn into white mist, and it turned into ice crystals and fell down. In the face of this terrifying blow from Loya, Zephyr lowered his center of gravity dignifiedly, and shattered the ice crystals on his hands and body with the force of his hand. Then chose dodge without hesitation. Boom! The ice storm missed Zephyr and hit the ground. The ground, which had been frozen even after it split open, screamed again, and the violent dragon-slaying magic made the ice cubes fly in all directions, cutting out a big hole. Then the castration continued unabated and spread outward until the entire battlefield was wrapped up, forming an upside-down bowl. Everything in the bowl will face the cutting and freezing of countless ice chips. Jingle jingle. Zephyr drove armament hockey, resisting bullet-like shards of ice. Shave. After launching the attack, before he had time to check his results, an extremely dangerous feeling shrouded Roha's heart. He suddenly widened his eyes, and twisted his waist and abdomen at the same time. Without looking at it, his left elbow slammed behind him, and a sharp ice blade grew at the elbow in the blink of an eye. Ice dragons sighed. Laugh. Hit. But before Loya could be happy, a heavy fist hit the back of the head. Ah! Loya rolled her eyes and lost consciousness. Catching Loya's falling body with his still intact left hand, Zephyr looked complicated, with a hint of emotion. Enough, I agree to your graduation examination. Chapter 97 Apply for Graduation. Headquarters Fortress, Conference Hall. Nothing happened today that required all the bigwigs to gather and discuss, and the world government did not put pressure on the Navy. It seemed that everything was so calm. However, they were still there. In the first place, Sengoku sorted out the materials in his hand, took out a stack and handed it to the Flying Squirrel. After Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel took it, he distributed the materials to all the bigwigs present. After everyone had a rough look at the information, he asked, Zephyr, Loya, how long have you been training? Hearing Sengoku's words, the rest raised their heads and looked at Zephyr, ready to hear this one's opinion. Although they don't know the specific time, they all know roughly that Loya joined the Navy and joined the recruit battalion within a few months, and it may not be enough for half a year. Facing the inquiry, Zephyr calmly gave the exact time. It took Loya a month to go from the ordinary recruit camp to the elite camp. It took Loya 3 months to apply for the graduation assessment from the elite camp to the present. As soon as this statement came out, everyone present was dumbfounded. 4 months. No, what kind of training is a month of toilet cleaning? In other words, it only took 3 months for Loya to officially set foot on the sea. On the field, both the 3 generals and Sengoku Karp felt a little breathless. You must know that even the 3 current generals who ate the devil fruit early took about a year to apply for graduation. This is not because they are hiding their strength, but because they did not have the ability to pass the graduation assessment before. And now, just 3 months later, Loya is about to graduate. The bosses present were speechless, and while admiring, they had more expectations for Loya. No matter what kind of monster, Loya is a Navy. Moreover, he has been cared for a lot in the Navy, from Zephyr, flying squirrel, down to the recruit canteen. He has a deep friendship with many people, and the chance of defecting from the Navy is negligible. In other words, Loya will be a Navy for the rest of his life. As a Navy boss, what could excite them more than their own growth? Thinking of Loya's talent and mind, his future achievements will never be under anyone present. Even Lieutenant General Crane was very curious about Loya, hoping to see this, the strongest recruit in the history of the Navy. Yes, it is the strongest. The news of the battle between Zephyr and Loya was too great that day. In less than half a day, the news spread to every corner of Malanford. They knew more than the underground soldiers, and they knew that Zephyr had brought out 5 layers of power at that time. Although Zephyr was the weakest compared to the rest of the people on the field except Crane, this weakness was also above the level of the strength of the naval admirals of all dynasties. His 5-tiered power was not something that a lieutenant general could compete with, but a real general standard. In other words, Loya already has the strength of a general at this moment. However, Loya has just touched the passing line, and his level of strength cannot be regarded as a general. It probably belongs to the stage of a candidate for a general of the Navy headquarters, which is on the same level as Lieutenant General Tautu who appeared in the theater version. This kind of power, even a lieutenant general of the headquarters, is rare, and the title of the strongest recruit is well deserved. Then, let me know, prepare your opponents for the death battle in prison. Seeing that there was no objection from everyone, Sengoku announced the result with a final word, with excitement flashing in his eyes. He believes that the first 2 stages of testing are no longer difficult for Loya. And the death battle in prison is the real stage to test hard power. Yes. At the door of the conference room, the flying squirt, who had been maintaining an upright posture, suppressed his inner excitement and gave a heavy salute. Sengoku sorted out the information in his hand and waited for the rest of the people to leave before asking Zephyr seemingly casually, "Are you sure, that's the feeling of freezing time?" Well, Zephyr bit his cigar and looked out the window. How do you describe that moment? In a trance. No. Loss of control. No. He rubbed his still sore arm and thought about it carefully. It's like falling asleep. Instincts including your body have disappeared, and you obviously don't feel anything, but when you wake up and come to your senses, you've already been attacked. Zephyr stretched out his right hand and pointed to the bruised and blackened muscles. Even if there is a little defense, I will not be injured to this extent. I have to solve the battle quickly to avoid the injury from getting worse. That piece of meat Sengoku looked very familiar, and he had seen too many when he led a team on a mission on a certain East Island. That's the way the muscles are frozen to death, the blood won't flow in it, and even the sense of touch is lost. At that time, in the face of those soldiers whose toes were frozen, he bit Kiba, endured nausea, and cut off the dead toes with scissors to avoid aggravating the injury. But the other party didn't respond at all. Instead, he turned his head strangely and asked him, "Why are you touching my feet?" He didn't feel the pain of his toes being cut off, he just felt his feet shaking. Sengoku sucked in a breath. "How are you feeling? Can you still exert yourself?" The 8 layers of Zephyr's strength are all hanging on these hands, and it is an unbearable pain to have one hand cut off. If he loses his arm, Sengoku is afraid that Zephyr will not be able to withstand the blow. After all, not everyone is Yongguo. Seeing Sengoku's appearance, Zephyr comforted him. "Don't worry, it's fine." He pointed to his prosthetic limb. "Fortunately, this prosthetic limb is made of special materials. It has withstood the first wave of cold air invasion for me. Now, regardless of the serious injury on my hand, in fact, I just need to pay more attention, at most a few it will take care of it in a month." Quote. Speaking of this, Zephyr seemed to remember something and asked Sengoku, "By the way, when it comes to prosthetics, didn't Vegapunk promise to help me design a combat prosthesis?" "Haven't done it yet." Zephyr isn't someone who can lie, and since he himself said it's fine, Sengoku can relax. However, when talking about the topic of prosthetic limbs, Sengoku sighed in his heart, and then pretended not to know. I don't know, he said that he would notify us when he was done, you don't have to worry. Now, isn't Loya going to graduate exams? You still put your mind on this, you have been busy for the past 2 months. Sengoku calmly changed the subject, and sure enough, Zephyr, who was eager to love his disciples, immediately took the bait. You're right, it's the matter of Loya's graduation that matters. Sengoku, where do you think it's more appropriate for Loya to be arranged after graduation? Well. Then, the two bosses chatted. Different from the recruit battalion, after the elite battalion graduates, even the last one will be directly assigned a military rank. Because after all, they were selected from the recruit camp through assessment, and there is no need to question their strength. It's just that, after the graduation assessment, which rank an officer becomes, still depends on the results of the graduation assessment. Of course, the comprehensive evaluation accumulated by the graduates during actual combat missions in the elite camp should also be calculated. The vast majority of people will convert these hidden military merit choices into their graduation grades to obtain higher positions, and a small number of people will consume these military merits in exchange for a request or some items. In this regard, the elite camp managed by Zephyr is undoubtedly very humane. After all, there are only a few people who are carefree and live for themselves. Most people live not for themselves, but more for their families. So if you hear elite camp graduates give up their military exploits and ask the Navy to set up a branch in a remote hometown, or arrange their hometown within the naval cruising range, don't make a fuss, it's a normal thing. Of course, Loya does not need to consider these. Now he just wants to know what position he can achieve after graduation. Chapter 98 Tier 3. Loya wanted to graduate not on a whim, but after careful consideration and consideration. He has now learned domineering, mastered 6 styles, and learned the return of life. His own combat experience has also risen, and he has grown into a strong man who can be on his own. Next, if he wants to achieve the strongest in the world, this makes him reluctantly give up his first love, give up the dream of a master architect and give up everything in his daily life. Then have to leave. Under the shelter, it will never become a climate, just like the flowers in the greenhouse, enchanting but easy to break. Sengoku Carp and others also grew up step by step in countless life and death struggles, and only have their current strength and status. Not to mention, the name of Iron Fist Garp is huge, and most of the fame is that Garp hit out Roger when he was chasing him, and chasing Roger, this is not an easy job. For Loya's request to graduate, Zephyr was ready to reject it for the first time, but he suddenly found that Loya couldn't learn more from him. He will, Loya has learned it all. He won't, and Kuzan will teach him when he comes back. Practical combat experience. These are not things that can be brought to Loya by playing a small game in the elite camp. In the elite battalion, no matter whether Loya has no opponents, the battles between comrades will be kept, even if it is a dangerous actual combat mission. In fact, several warships will follow him to escort him. No matter how much Loya learns, in the face of a real life and death struggle, these experiences are of little use. What's more, he has now achieved domineering cultivation, and he has learned to return his life. The problem of lack of combat experience can be gradually improved in the future. Continuing to stay in the elite battalion is a waste, both for Loya and for the entire naval headquarters. A waste of talent. But letting Loya leave like this, Zephyr felt very uncomfortable. He hadn't met such a talented penultimate disciple for too long, and he had already made a decision to teach Loya what he had learned all his life before leaving. Unexpectedly, in just a few months, Loya has learned everything he knows. The feeling of suffocation when punched on the cotton made Zephyr want to vomit blood in depression. In order to find an excuse to vent his inner dissatisfaction openly, Zephyr used the excuse of testing Loya's true strength and wanted to teach Loya a lesson. And told Loya that as long as he showed his satisfactory strength in battle, he would agree to his application. From Zepha's point of view, the current Loya's strength is probably at the level of a general lieutenant general. Even if he learns the sixth form and then starts the explosion, he is only equivalent to the lieutenant general of the headquarters. But the result was beyond his expectations. The current Loya, after transformation, is really powerful. Strength, speed, defense, these three hard indicators of combat were perfectly achieved by Loya, and even better. Zepha can be sure that as long as the current Loya goes to the test, it is enough to break all the records of the elite battalion. Because of the test, Zepha can be sure that Loya's current strength has surpassed most of the lieutenant generals of the headquarters. In the Navy, it is second only to the three generals and their group of old guys, and several middle-ranking generals. Will be quite. How old is Loya? 24. How long until he got the devil fruit? Half a year. Recalling everything Loya had done, and watching the suffocating growth rate, Zepha felt bitter in his heart. Indeed, as a teacher, I have no reason to stop my disciples from becoming stronger. In the courtyard room at night, Loya sat quietly on the bed and meditated. The bright moonlight shone through the window and sprinkled on his body, like a layer of white gauze, reflecting the chill around Loya's body. During the daytime battle, Loya gradually discovered some small problems that he currently has, and is now summarizing them and then improving them. True cultivation is not something that can be accomplished overnight. Once you have learned it, it does not mean you can use it skillfully. As Zepha had warned him, he was still a rookie. Combat experience takes a long time to accumulate, and a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, so there is no rush. At this moment, Loya was wrapped in a layer of ice, and the cold air froze everything in the room. The magic power flowed rapidly through him, like a rushing river, producing a humming sound that was audible enough to be heard. When he played against Zepha today, the ice dragon's sickle used in that move was not the dragon-slaying magic that the system came with, but a move he developed himself, like awakening pseudo-dragon transformation. And after an upgrade, it was incorporated into a skill by the system. Now Loya's attributes have changed tremendously, and even, he is ready to cross that last hurdle. Name, Christopher Loya. Energy stage, 2nd and 10th floor. Energy value, 1500. Mana, 12,000. Mana recovery speed, 1100 per minute. Dragon strength, 15%. Dragon body, 35%. After learning domineering and 6 styles, after several battles, Loya's energy value was finally full. Especially the hardy battle with Zephana today, which made Loya's energy value soar by 200 points, making the energy value directly full. Today, he will make a leap after a long time, officially entering the third order. How many months? Looking at the finally full energy value on the screen, Loya sighed wearily. He did not expect that the energy increase of this second order would be so slow. Although from the time point of view, it took him only 3 months to reach this step, and it is already flying at a speed. After all, it took a month for the first stage to the second stage. However, considering the gap between these few months and the month on the deserted island, Loya couldn't help sighing. Tier 3, it will definitely be more troublesome. It is conceivable that the second rank alone makes Loya squeeze his potential, fighting and cultivating all day long. This kind of days lasted for 3 months before finally reaching full value. So what about Tier 3? Even if the difficulty does not increase, according to the second order standard, I am afraid it will take more than half a year. This is far from the first order days when you can level up by eating, drinking, and drinking. Today's battle with Zepha actually had a reason why Loya didn't resist. In addition to wanting to know the gap between himself and the general, it is also because the energy value is just a little bit worse, so I don't bother. Fortunately, the results were good. It's just that my head is still a little dizzy and I can't lie down. Looking at the attribute bar on the screen, Loya took a deep breath and suppressed the restlessness in his heart caused by the upgrade. The warm-up is over, come on. He stretched out his finger, clicked on the upgrade option on the panel, and, Click. The familiar magic vibration did not appear. But at this moment, a lot of blue light suddenly appeared in Loya's room. They floated in the air, and when they appeared, they froze the entire room. What's the situation? Without feeling the familiar feeling of Saiyan leveling up, Roha opened his eyes strangely, and he was startled at a glance. As far as the eye can see, it is snow white. Walls, floors, tables, benches, windows, doors, all were frozen. A thick layer of ice formed on it, and the ice slid down from the ceiling, making the whole house look like a 1,000-year-old ice cave. The cold air from his feet woke up Loya. He looked down, and his feet started to freeze. And this trend is still going up. It seems to freeze his whole person. Grass. Luoya was shocked. Although the dragon's body soared to 35%, the dragon's power also successfully broke 10, and his freezing resistance greatly increased. But he definitely wouldn't want to try what it's like to be frozen, especially these unidentified ice. Shave. Moon step. Loya moved, trying to smash the ice and rush out of the room. But, thump. The dizzy Loya hugged his head and rolled on the ground in pain. Ah. So hard. What the hell is this? The strength of these ice cubes is actually harder than the ice cubes made by the Dragon Slayer magic. They are no longer as hard as steel, and Roha believes that even the sea-floor stone that he has seen is probably the same in hardness. At this point, he can swear by the big bag on his head. Chapter 99 Unknown Voice. Just as Loya sucked in the cool air and rubbed her head, suddenly, the ice in the whole room began to shrink rapidly, and suddenly rushed towards Loya. Hold the grass. Come back. Loya smacked his mouth impatiently, clenched his fists, and aimed at the ice Jinchuriki column that was rushing towards him. Bah. Take my punch. Bang. One side is an ice cube, the other side is a fist. The collision of the two actually made a crisp sound like the symphony of gold and iron. Loya did not expect that these ice cubes would be so strong, and a punch with 70% of the force did not break it. You must know that he used armament hockey just now. Even steel can be smashed with one punch this time. But these ice cubes are not at all different. Whoosh. At this time, countless ice belts rose under Loya's feet, fluttering in the air like veils, but with the confrontation just now, whoever would really regard them as flammable and fragile tool would be a fool. Suddenly, these ice belts tensed and slammed around Loya's body. The speed of the ice belt was so fast that it made the air crackle. Pat. Then, Luoya, who was caught off guard, was wrapped into a zongzi. He struggled hard, but found that even the ice belt as thin as a cicada's wings had a hardness not inferior to steel. He can still break one or two, but if so many are tied together, he will not be able to do anything. After the ice belt wrapped around Loya, it quickly began to deform, and the ice belts merged with each other, quickly turning Loya into an ice sculpture. At this time, Loya discovered that these ice cubes did not seem to cause damage to himself. Even the ice made by oneself will be eroded by the cold air when it is close, and it can only be resisted by the physique of the Ice Dragon Slayer magician. Even if the impact is small, it will have an impact after all. But these ice cubes are different. Even if they are tightly wrapped now, not only do they not feel frostbitten, they are even a little comfortable. Just like every time he leveled up, the soothing feeling spread from his dantian to his whole body, making him unable to extricate himself. What is this? A new way to upgrade? Loya thought with a bewildered expression. At this moment, the ice cubes in the room suddenly accelerated their shrinking speed, wrapping him into a ball in an instant. Just when Loya upgraded, the entire elite camp courtyard became lively again. Wearing a nightgown, Aludo pushed open the door angrily, shouting as he walked, "Loya! Can't you practice during the day, you bastard?" When he was sleeping soundly, he was suddenly shocked by the dragon power generated by Loya's upgrade. That's right, let's teach him a lesson together. Brother Jerome sprang out of nowhere, leaned on Arudo's broad shoulders, and yawned. But at this time, a terrifying cold air burst out from Loya's room, and the cold wind was like an unsheathed arrow, blowing across the faces of several people in an instant. Click. Ouch. Aludo took a deep breath and touched his chest hair, where the hair was frozen, and the feeling of ice sticking to his worn chest was very refreshing. He quickly patted off the frozen ice slag, and Aludo tilted his head and asked, "Jerome, you said, do we want to continue?" The fluctuations this time are a bit big. Aldo can't guarantee the extent of the cold air that Loya spreads this time. The information is unknown, and there is no need for exploration. Jerome's physique was not as good as Aldo's. The cold wind only cooled Aldo's heart, but it had already made them both shiver. Hearing Aludo's words, Brother Jerome shook his head neatly. No go, let's go back to sleep." "Okay, then I'll go by myself," Arudo said, and continued to walk forward. Brother Jerome on his shoulders stepped on the moon step at the same time as he stepped, and quickly left the courtyard. I don't know why, after the terrifying cold air broke out for the first time, it did not continue to rage, but was confined to a small area. Aludo rushed outside Loya's house and opened his mouth to shout, but he immediately saw a figure and hurriedly stood at attention and saluted, "Teacher Zephyr." Because it was late at night, Zephyr finally took off his angry purple suit and put on a bathrobe-like pajamas. However, the pajamas were also purple. All purple, no variegation. If Loya is here, he will inevitably complain a few words, but now there is only Aludo, and he can't notice these details. Well, don't go there. Loya should have had a heavy datapa, great breakthrough. Feeling that Arudo was too close to the door, Zephyr reminded him, "Don't disturb him, don't come near, be careful of frostbite." Zephyr, who can use observation hockey proficiently, can naturally see the strangeness of these ice cubes. It is no longer a simple cold, but a literal freezing. He had a feeling that this kind of ice, even if he was prepared, would be unlucky if he encountered it. Hearing Zephyr's advice, Aludo suddenly burst into flames for no reason. He tore off his pajamas, wearing only shorts, and folded his fists. "Oh. I understand, Teacher Zephyr. I will never let people bother Loya." "Zephyr. So what is your brain circuit like? You understand what you understand." The person who asked the question is so dumbfounded. I said, this. At this moment, at the corner of the wall, Mingda Yundan came over, but before he put his hand down, a huge shadow had come to him. Ha, Uru. Boom. The next second, Mingd was directly hugged by Aludo, and he tore his special oversized pajamas into strips of cloth, entangling Mingd. Slap. Mingd, who was wrapped into a zongzi, blinked, looked down at the cloth belt on his body, and then glanced at Aludo. Then he turned his eyes to Zephyr. "Teacher Zephyr, this is..." Woo-woo. Aludo loosened the cloth ball that was stuffed into Mingdi's mouth, expressing his satisfaction with his craftsmanship. Then, he carried Ming to the wall, put it down and continued to patrol. Zephyr held his forehead weakly. "Who told you that Loya needs your escort? Do you think I am dead? And don't bother him now, even I can't get in." Loya in the room didn't know what was going on outside, and he was now completely immersed in the thrill of strength improvement. In his sea of consciousness, the dark space was constantly lit and extinguished, repeated again and again, and accumulated again and again. The blue brilliance kept flying and circling in the darkness, bringing with it wisps of faint shimmer. At this moment, Loya couldn't feel the existence of his body, and countless blue light bands shuttled through the darkness, so hazy and clear. Slowly, the moving trajectories of these light bands became orderly. Begin to draw circles in one direction, and the fluorescent dots leave a beautiful arc in the dark. I don't know how long it has passed. These light bands have gradually grown, from being as thin as a hair at the beginning to now as thick as an arm. The light belt keeps circling, the speed is getting faster and the space is getting brighter and brighter, like a sunrise, magnificent. Loya. Suddenly, a pleasant female voice echoed in this silent space. Loya suddenly opened his eyes. Who is it? At the same time, outside the house, Zephyr's observation hockey gave an instant warning, and he instantly retreated. At the same time, His body became pitch black and he used armament hockey. Boom! A strong explosion sounded in the courtyard, and the turbulent airflow spread outward, making the trees and buildings in the courtyard creak, as if they were about to fall apart in the next second. Away from the center of the explosion, Zephyr raised his head and looked in the direction of Loya's room, taking a deep breath. What the hell is that? Chapter 100 Ice Dragon. Chapter 100 for recommendation and collection. It is rare that the mobile phone assistant does not get windy, and applauds the rewarding bosses. Clap 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 clap, happy belly pats. I saw a huge shadow appearing above the ruined Mukuro in the hut. With the bright moonlight at night and the faint light in the distance, Zephyr saw a ferocious claw sticking out from the dust, and then fell heavily, smashing the rockery in the courtyard. With just one paw, there are two as big as him. The monster was majestic, and the endless pressure spread, making people breathless, but vaguely, Zephyr could feel a familiar aura. This is Loya. Aang. Suddenly, the monster roared into the sky, as if it was venting something. The surging Longwei rushed towards all directions without hesitation. Crunch. In Zephyr's shocked eyes, at this moment, dense cracks appeared in the earth, buildings, trees and stones. Even he himself could feel the bursts of tearing from his body. Ling Lai's cold air suddenly appeared, freezing everything around him in a blink of an eye. Call. The gust of wind suddenly blew up, and countless rubble and broken wood were wrapped around and shot out like cannonballs. While dodging, Zephyr took this opportunity to look at the monster that finally surfaced. What kind of thing is that? It has a slender and sturdy body, and its muscles are full of drums. It looks explosive, but it is smooth and not bloated. Two blue bat-like fleshy wings appeared behind it, and the white bone spurs emerging from the tips of the joints made the pair of wings look very ferocious. At this moment, the wings were stretched out, and their size almost spread over the entire courtyard. Under the moonlight, they left a huge shadow on the ground. Compared with its overall size, its claws are a bit slender, and the sharp claws slashed across the ground, as if butter met a Yuhi burning knife, and it was easily scratched with a dent. Whether it is stone or iron equipment, it is easily cut off. A long and flexible tail slammed into the attic next to it as it roared up to the sky, and the diamond-shaped tail hammer on it sank deep into the iron training room. When it was pulled, it was accompanied by the sour steel twisting sound of Kiba. The whole attic was directly bombed into slag. It has blue-white scales, which are clean and translucent. Under the moonlight, it exudes a gleaming light. It's like ice cubes. Zephyr couldn't help thinking. Looking at the things in front of him, he didn't come back to his senses for a long time. At this time, the dragon's roar ended, and the thick nostrils opened and closed, sniffing the smell in the air. Then it lowered its house-sized head, and its golden vertical pupils carefully looked at the man in front of him with the bathrobe slipping down to his waist, and slowly approached him. Zephyr didn't dare to move, although this thing had the aura of Loya, but at this moment, the pair of pupils showed curiosity and scrutiny. It is impossible for Loya not to know him, nor to look at him with such eyes. In other words, at this moment, Loya, or this monster, does not know him. Zephyr was secretly startled by the dragon's might that had been exuded just now. Now, being watched by the other party, he instantly knew one thing. That is, he is not the opponent of this monster. So he dared not move. Hey, you're not going to eat me, Loya, Zephyr said in a low voice, for fear that the loud noise would irritate the creatures in front of him. The movement of the creature in front of him stopped abruptly, and a hint of doubt flashed in the golden vertical pupils like cold-blooded animals. After a pause, it shook its big head, opened its mouth, and the lightning-like horns that stretched back along its neck followed its movements, drawing dots of ice crystals in the air. The huge dragon mouth opened and closed, and the cold air it exhaled froze Zephyr's hair. Zephyr looked at the mouth full of sharp teeth with trembling, and quietly moved his right foot back half a step, ready to escape at any time. At this time, the creature whimpered and closed its mouth. Bang! As if fireworks exploded, Zephyr watched in shock as the dragon in front of him scattered into countless ice cubes. Then, a flower flashed before his eyes, and a figure came to him. "So, why do you think I'm going to eat you, Mr. Zephyr?" At this moment, Loya looked no different from usual, except that the diamond pattern on his wrist disappeared, and two mysterious lines formed on the left and right of his forehead. The texture is like the texture of scales. This pattern is one left and one right, along Loya's neck to the shoulders, then to the chest, and finally to the lower abdomen, thighs and soles of the feet. Every time it passed, a spiral pattern was left there, and with Loya's breathing, it kept flickering, bright and dark. As he spoke, Loya lowered his head and looked at the bathrobe on Zephyr's body. "I was just curious, Mr. Zephyr, there is a vacuum inside you." Click. A cross burst out on Zephyr's forehead, biting Kiba and humming, "Humph. You exhibitionists don't have the right to speak of me." Exposed. Mad. Luoya was stunned for a moment, but also looked down at his lower body, which was not shaved, and then shuddered, "Hold the grass. No wonder I felt cold just now. I thought it was what about the side effects of the transformation?" Zephyr. Big news. Big news. The courtyard of the elite camp was destroyed, and the suspect was Christopher Loya. At present, the three generals have been involved in the investigation. Please pay attention to the follow-up reports for details. People sailing at sea usually wait for the newspapers delivered by the newsbird except for banquets when they are boring. The Navy headquarters naturally has its own unique way of entertainment, such as this child who is running around in the headquarters, shouting and selling small-town newspapers. This kid is not entertainment, the point is the newspaper in his hand. Snapped. Loya patted the newspaper he bought in front of Kuzan and asked with a bad expression, "Mr. Kuzan, can't you give me an explanation?" Kuzan, who took a nap with his blindfold on, yawned, stretched out his hand and groped on the table, looking at Loya with a black line on his head. After a long while, he finally touched the newspaper. After picking it up, he pushed up the blindfold with his other hand and glanced with his sleepy eyes. Snapped. In less than a second, Kuzan patted the newspaper back on the table, pulled off the blindfold again and prepared to sleep. "What? Weston's newspaper office, you can go to Simon and talk about the situation yourself." "Hey, you don't care about spreading rumors in the headquarters of the Navy." Loya looked at him in disbelief. "How did you become a general like this? You stay at the headquarters this month, you don't care about these things. Besides, what's the situation? I'm afraid of dying too late and want to catch the early bus." Facing Loya's accusation, Kuzan didn't move, the corner of his mouth twitched, and two syllables came out, "Hee hee." I'm so violent." Loya was trembling with anger, clenching his fists and considering whether to give him a punch. But after struggling for a long time, he thought of the strength comparison between the two sides, and gave up this seemingly beautiful idea. So, Loya reluctantly picked up the newspaper and left, and at the moment when the door was closed, he said cruelly, "You wait, when I can control the deformation, I will take your first try." "Well, please." Boom. The door was slammed shut, and Kuzan's adjutant was taken aback. "How dare you talk to the general like this? This Christopher Loya is simply too arrogant."